Okay, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, welcome everybody to our first Planning Committee meeting of 2021. Welcome you all back to the members, officers and the general public. Hope you've had a reasonable Christmas and New Year. I'm back here in County Hall, but the majority of the committee are still remote and tuning in, although I've got backup of a couple of members and also some officers, so that we can keep on going and keep the wheels turning here in Monmouthshire. I hope you've all been okay and that you haven't had too many instances of people being ill in your family or close friends. I will now read the instructions that I have to read at the start of this meeting. So welcome everybody, and I'm sure this is going to be the start of a better new year for us all. It's held remotely. This meeting is being held in accordance with the emergency legislation that enables the Council to hold this meeting remotely, alongside the Council's constitution, and ensures that the Council can continue to operate and make democratic decisions in an open and transparent way. I would like to remind members that this meeting is still being live streamed to the public, and can I request that you switch off your cameras and mute microphones when you are not speaking directly to the committee to ensure that there is no unnecessary background noise. All sections of the Members' Code of Conduct will apply to members in this virtual meeting environment and are as applicable now as they are in a traditional meeting setting. Can I also remind members of the meeting to ensure that their chat functionality is switched on, and should they wish to speak on a particular item, to make the request clear in that area, and I will invite you to speak at the relevant point in the meeting, where you would then unmute your microphone and switch your camera back on. Please do not jump in, because I cannot see whether somebody is just jumping in the middle of a conversation, and it does disjoint the meeting. So please make sure your hand is up if you wish to speak, and I will then invite you to speak. Decisions of this remote committee will hold the same weight as a decision of a normal planning committee, provided that meeting remains quorate and meets its legislative requirement to make a decision, regardless of whether a member of this meeting is unable to cast a vote due to technical issues. The decision of the committee will remain valid, and we do get technical glitches every now and again, like the last committee, the lights were going on and off, but we managed to get through it. And I have received apologies today from councillors. At least one I know is Councillor Giles Howard. I don't know if Democratic Services have heard of anyone else, please.
The only one I've received, yeah.
Right, thank you, Richard. So that is all of the apologies for absence.
Chair, I think Councillor Evans is not with us. He's been in hospital.
Right, I wish him well, and I dare say he hasn't been in a position to give his apologies. So I'll take it as he has apologised. Thank you, Councillor Eason. Declarations of interest next, please.
Chair, I have to declare an interest on the application with regards to 62 Chepstow Road in Caldicott. I previously declared an interest. I shall take no part in the meeting.
Right, thank you very much indeed.
Yes, Chair, the same for me, the same application, 62 Newport Road, Chepstow Road. I'm personal prejudicial. I won't take any part in the discussion. Thank you.
Right, thank you both members, and I do believe you have to make sure that you have disconnected yourself from the meeting. I'm sure Richard will advise on that, but I think that's what you have to do when it comes to that application. Any other declarations? Right, you've all had chance to look at, we've had a bit more chance this time to read the minutes of the last meeting. So does anybody wish to move, or is there any items of accuracy that you wish to raise?
Chair.
Yes, Councillor Eason. I haven't got a track bar to.
No, I haven't got a hand anywhere, so I can't do it. On page 20, about the 12th bullet point in that page, there's two references to 50 metres. Those 50 metres should read 15 metres.
Right, thank you. Anybody else got anything to raise? And we'll make sure that that is amended in the meetings. So otherwise, do you wish to move the minutes of the last meeting, Councillor Eason?
Yes, Chair.
Anybody else wish now to second the minutes?
I'll second.
Chairman, can I ask why in the meeting chat I got yesterday's meeting on here in the chat bar? Does anybody know why?
I'm not sure of that, Councillor Powell, but perhaps there's a technical advisor in the Democratic Service, maybe Richard or Nicola or somebody can alter that for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. So you've seconded the minutes as well then?
Yeah.
Councillor Powell, did you second the minutes?
I did.
Right, thank you. Right, we'll now go on to the next the first application on the agenda. We do have some sort of public speaking, not in person, but have written in, and it will be read out by officers on the relevant applications. So we're going to take it as listed in the agenda. So the first application today, this will be on application 00834. And this is in Abergavenny, Lintilio Patholi. And I believe, Phil, are you presenting this?
Actually, it's Andrew, Chair.
Andrew, right. Thank you, Andrew. I suppose I missed you at the briefing, so I got mixed up on that. So if you can now, please, Andrew.
Excuse me, Chair, just before we pass to...
Yes, Craig.
Excuse me, Chair, just before we pass to Andrew, can I just give you a bit of a
yes,
planning committee?
I missed me not to say that because I think several members of the committee have been notified by a certain body. So I should think they'd all welcome the clarity on that. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, planning committee members, you would have noticed in the last half an hour I've sent over an email just to share some context with regards to the application which you are due to consider next. This application, we've had a notification from the Welsh Government. They've had a request to investigate whether to call the application in for determination, for Welsh Government to call the application in. So they are investigating that. We have been in communication with the Welsh Government and they have expressed that as a planning committee, that it's correct that you consider the planning application on its merits today, make a decision as to whether as a council we would support the proposed development or we would recommend refusal. So the Welsh Government are currently investigating whether to call this application in. That has no bearing on your determination of the application. You have to look at it based on its own merits. And then following the planning committee's decision today, the Welsh Government will make a decision whether to call the application in or not. So that is the procedure. If the planning committee decided today that the application was to be refused, then as a council we would refuse the application. The Welsh Government give us that direction to be able to do that. If the planning committee agree with the officer's recommendation and approve this development, then they will make a decision within the time periods as to whether to call it in or not, in which case it would be considered by the planning inspectorate and finally by the Welsh Minister. So that's just a bit of background in terms of that calling procedure. It shouldn't have any implications on how you determine the application today. You should be considered exactly the same way as you do with any other planning application, and deal with it based on its current planning merit. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Craig. Before you leave, is there anybody now who's not clear on what Craig has just said? Anybody wish to ask him anything now before Andrew presents the application? No, it seems everybody's clear.
Sorry, I just wondered, could I ask a question, Chair?
Yes, Councillor Brown.
Is the call-in, do we have any notification of what the, they're supposed to give reasons for a call-in. Do we have any notification of what the reasons for a potential call-in are? Because I don't think the letter that we were sent
well, it hasn't got to the stage of a call-in yet because we haven't decided on the application yet. It's only then later on that they would have to give reason for that.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Do you want me to help there? So this site is a site outside of the development boundary, not allocated within the plan. So the Welsh Government are considering whether it complies with the LDP and with placemaking. So they're the two key things that need to be looked at. But as I've said in my statement previously, I think planning committee members just need to look at this application based on the current planning merit in relation to its own local development plan and the evaluation that's outlined in the committee report. So members just are minded to view it in terms of the local development plan as it stands. It'd be for the Welsh Government to determine whether they call in the application or not.
Chair, could I get a bit more clarity from Craig? When we discussed the development of Raglan, we didn't discuss the development on the basis there may be a call-in, or the one in Caldicot there may be a call-in. the fact that there may be a call in or maybe a decision to call in, doesn't that cloud our decision making? It shouldn't do, but would
No,
it?
it shouldn't. No, take that out of your mind.
That's the point I'm getting at. Yeah.
Yeah, you just take it as Andrew will present the application, and we now decide on its own merit and whether it transpires it comes to a call, and that is down the road. So please do not let that cloud our discussion now this afternoon.
Just want to clarify that. Yes, that's clear.
Right,
Yeah.
thank you. I haven't got a chat bar, so which is a bit annoying because then I can't see who wishes to come in. I've got Councillor Jim Higginson is on the screen. I don't know he wishes to say anything.
No, Madam. No, Madam Chairman. I'm okay.
Do you have any news of Councillor Evans?
Yes, he came home from hospital yesterday afternoon or early evening. I spoke to him this morning, and he seems in fine spirits, I have to say. But you have to bear in mind that he's been in hospital. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, he's been in hospital for a week, so he's going to take a day or two to get back into the fold, if you like. But I spoke to him this morning, so he is okay.
Right, thank you very much indeed. Right, right, Andrew, I'll expect you now to make the presentation. Thank you, Councillor Higginson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Craig, as well for the introduction in terms of the call-in process. Just waiting for the presentation to become available for you members. Should be here in a moment.
I think I've got it.
Yeah. Yeah, so you should all be able to see the presentation shared on screen. So this application is before you today, members, as it is a departure application. In addition to that, there are objections from more than 5 households. It's a full application for 12 affordable homes. The site itself is approximately just over 1.14 hectares and sits to the east of Hereford Road in Llantilio Patholi, just north of Abergavenny. Just go through some photographs on the screen. Now you can see there the site opposite side of the hedge. Down there it's a lower level to Hereford Road. And just to confirm, as Craig had mentioned in his dialogue earlier, that the site is outside of the development boundary, although immediately adjacent to it. So just to quickly run through the site photographs for your benefit. So that's the site there at a lower level to Hereford Road. You can see there it's also in close proximity to the Church of St Tylo, which is a Grade 2 listed church, and that sits to the east of the application site. And you can see a view there in the sort of background there in the church. That's the lane there you just saw that runs to the north of the site, leading towards the church. And again, that's the boundary of the site. It's set down with the church then set behind a band of mature trees, right in the far distance there. And that gives you the entire extent then of the red line site. So in terms of the plans, you will have seen in the officers' report, these have been subject to some significant negotiation with officers. The scheme that's now before you is for 6 groups of semi-detached dwellings with 1 new central vehicular access. And by comparison, the original scheme was for 14 dwellings, and this with only 5 affordable. And they would have required a substantial new retaining wall running through the length of the service road within the site. But you can now see the layout split, 6 dwellings either side of a new entrance. Also under the current proposal is for a new pumping station that would be proposed to connect the foul drainage to the existing main sewer, and say that single central access located centrally within the site and would be just a simple priority junction. The dwellings themselves have been also subject to amendments. That's a sort of a street scene cross section there you can see, and you can also see there the levels on the cross sections
how they are set down from Hereford Road. The dwellings themselves have adopted, quite I say, a very simple contemporary approach. Each would feature vertical timber boarding at first floor level, and also a slate roof with PV arrays also. And the ground floors would be finished with either some plots red brick and others with render. If we just go on through those house types. So that's examples there with the red brick. So if you just come on to the layout, which has also been subject to much amendment and negotiation. So other enhancements and value that's been added through the negotiation process would see a new footpath to enable connection to the wider network routes, and you can see that in the red dotted line, an arrow that's indicating where it would leave the site there on screen now. In addition to that, you should also be able to see next to the routes there is an area of informal open play space, and this is on the most sort of northerly extent of the site. As you can see on there, there's also considerable new planting that would reinforce existing areas. That's in the area shaded number 2, as well as a large species-rich meadow that is in the area marked number 3 on the plan on screen. Let's go on to the next slide then. So in terms, members, then of the material considerations, as stated by officers at the outset, the site is located just outside the development boundary for Abergavenny, and as such is considered open countryside, whereby a residential use would be contrary to policy S1. However, national planning policy that is set out in PPW 10 does clearly state that a community's need for affordable housing is a material planning consideration. Furthermore, PPW 10 also states that the provision of affordable housing exception sites must be considered to help out meet identified requirements and ensure the viability of the local community. Thus, officers are of the view that there is national policy support for small affordable exception sites such as this. Turning to our own LDP, Policy H7 provides support for 100% affordable housing exception sites, but this is, however, in respect of sites adjacent to rural secondary settlements, main and minor villages. Therefore, whilst main towns are not listed under Policy H7, the site does adjoin the boundary of one of the county's most sustainable settlements. Turning then to the issue of need, there is currently a shortfall of 277 affordable units since the beginning of the current plan period. And officers review that this proposal would provide an 100% affordable development that will go towards meeting the need identified in the LDP within a sustainable location. With regard to flooding in principle, whilst part of the site is within the C2 flood zone, all of the dwellings are located outside of this area. In terms of other material considerations, and in particular placemaking, in terms of this, the amendments have fully considered the assets and opportunities the site presents. This includes reinstating previously poorly maintained boundaries, improving local connectivity, and making the provision of accessible open play space. The site itself is set down from Hereford Road, as you've seen on the cross sections, with the majority of the mature hedgerow that bounds the site to the highway being retained, the only opening being for the vehicular access. A buffer area outside of the dwelling plots would also be formed behind that hedgerow, which would further help integrate the dwellings into the surrounding landscape. As stated previously, that there is a Grade 2 listed church in close proximity to the site, and this is being considered through the negotiation process with both the council's heritage team and landscape and urban design officer. The site is to some extent self-contained, with boundaries to be reinforced as stated, and these amendments have resulted in key views to the church being preserved. As noted previously, the dwellings themselves are of a simple design solution. The reduction in density from 14 to 12 was welcomed by officers, and coupled with changes to the layout have helped to provide sufficient safeguards for the surrounding assets, including heritage assets and wider rural landscape. And finally, in terms of placemaking, the scheme proposes open space throughout, including a species-rich meadow and other areas for informal play. The provision of a new footpath that would help improve local connectivity is also welcomed and considered an important part of placemaking. In terms of other material considerations and sustainable transport issues, as I stated earlier, the area is considered to be a sustainable location, and Abergavenny itself is served by good pedestrian connections, as well as links from this site to onward national cycle routes. Abergavenny has a bus station, and there are regular services in short walking distance via Hereford Road from the application site. Looking further at sustainable modes of transport, Abergavenny train station is approximately 2.5 miles away, and this provides further onward journeys to destinations such as Cardiff, Manchester, for other potential employment opportunities. Therefore, the development is considered to have full regard to the sustainable transport hierarchy as set out in PPW 10 and would score high in that regard. Turning to the private motor vehicle, the single site entrance would achieve visibility displays as required of 2.5 meters, 2.4 meters, sorry, by 90 meters. And the scheme is also fully compliant with off-street parking requirements. No objections have been made by the Council's Highways Engineer in respect of the 12-unit scheme, and is not considered that the 12 affordable units would lead to an unacceptable deterioration in highway safety or capacity, and as such the development is considered fully compliant with policy MV1 of the adopted LDP. In conclusion, whilst the development is a technical departure from the LDP, it would provide much needed 100% affordable housing. The site also sits adjacent to one of the county's most sustainable settlements in the town of Abergavenny. Through considerable negotiation and amendment, the scheme would safeguard the wider landscape as well as the historic Church of St Tylo. As such, subject to the detailed conditions set out in the officer's report, including Green Infrastructure Management Plan and Traffic Management Plan, as well as the Section 106 that would be required to secure the affordable housing, the application is presented with a recommendation for approval.
Thank you very much indeed, Andrew, for that. I do believe, if I'm correct, that there is a statement to be read by the local member. Is that correct, Craig? The local member being Councillor Malcolm Lane.
Is Councillor Lane here? I don't think, is Councillor Lane in the meeting?
He's not in the meeting. Has he sent anything in to address the meeting or not?
No, not to my knowledge, no.
No, right. Thank you for that, Craig.
Comments in the report. Yeah.
Yeah. So I will then ask the next member to that ward. I believe that would be Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, indeed, it's I'm immediately adjacent to the ward. But a bit of preamble at the start. A couple of members have pointed out that we've got a Welsh Government intervention here, and in fact, if you look at the letter, when I looked at it, I thought that's very intimidatory, and I like to work on evidence. And if you look at the correspondence for this particular application, it's been in existence for a long time, and there's over 260 bits of information there for or against the application that I can read and help to for me to make my mind up. I have nothing from the Welsh Government saying why this is being called in, and I think that really is significant. If there's a good reason why this should happen, and I've never known it happen before considering an application, I really would be interested to know why. What organisation or what individual is pulling strings to such an extent that this should be happening. Anyway, enough of that. The other thing to remember about this application is that it's directly opposite the Derry Farm application of 250 houses. And if you carry on along the Hereford Road past St Silo's Church, just the other side of the church is a Brecon Beacons National Park development at Coed y Brenin, with many more houses than this, all set alongside the Gymini River in much closer proximity than to the river than the proposed houses on this site. The other preamble is that we have been made aware that there's 700 plus households in Abergavenny that are desperate for affordable housing, and this site is going to be run by a housing association, 100% affordable. Not only that, if you go through the actual plans before us, you'll see that practically, I think almost without exception, every consultee that we have to really take seriously has come out with no problems on this application at all. I won't read out the list, but every single consultee is happy, sometimes provided that we add the appropriate conditions in, which we must do at the very end, make sure those conditions are there. And the senior planning policy officer, and I think that it's important to read what she said. Overall, it's considered that in light of the proposal providing much needed affordable housing within an area of significant need, and the site being in a sustainable location in that it immediately adjoins Abergavenny's settlement boundary. I think that's important, immediately adjoins. The proposal for 100% affordable housing can be considered favourably as an affordable housing exception site, as supported under paragraph 4 to 34 of Planning Policy Wales 10 2018, provided detailed planning considerations relating to settlement form, landscape and access can be satisfactorily addressed. And I think it's important for that to be noted in this consideration, so that if it is called in by the Welsh Government, they are aware of the fact that it complies with Planning Policy Wales. As I've mentioned before, if you look through the application, consultees are happy, even with the fact that we have a Grade 1 listed building almost within view is not sufficient for CADU to say don't you dare do this. I could go on and on, but what I will say is that all the information that I've read, apart from the usual objectives, all the information that is provided to me by the people that we have to consider as major consultees don't have a problem with this, and as such I'm happy when the time comes to move approval of this application. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Harris. I didn't wish to repeat anything that you've said. I concur wholeheartedly with all the list of consultees, as you said, with no objections. And I think, you know, somebody has preempted what our decisions might be, and to think that they could call in, but we have to put that aside at the moment and discuss it as we see it, as the application has come before us today. So who next? I believe Councillor Feakin is the next one who wishes to speak on the application. Councillor Feakin.
I thought I was first, Ruth.
Oh,
It
sorry.
was- It was
Sorry,
Maureen.
I'd gone off the screen because Councillor Harris was behind you, but of course, being the next adjacent ward, he was asked to speak first. So Councillor Powell and then Councillor Feakin. Thank you, Councillor Powell.
Thank you very much. I won't keep you. What I'm a bit intrigued about is the fact that it has been called in before we've had a chance to look at it.
It hasn't been called in as such.
Ah, it hasn't been called in as such. Ah, right. That's the only thing I was wondering about is that one of the complaints is that there's too many houses being built around there. Back many years ago, and I don't know how many, and you probably remember it. There was an area a little bit near Abergavenny, down by Junction Cottages, a field there where I'm sure we gave planning permission for about 8, perhaps a couple more, 8 houses, and unless it's been built on since I've been locked down up here, has never been built on. And this happens. It's a little, as you say, it's a place in Raglan the same, and we try to build more houses, and we get lots of complaints. And then we haven't actually built houses on areas that have been given permission. And I think, I wonder what's anything we can do about that, because if they'd been built, that would have been some of the houses that were needed. And it seems a bit strange that we then have an application that is not very happy with the local people. But there's one not very far down the road that could have been built on and hasn't. I don't know if anybody can answer that for me.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Craig, are you on the screen? Do you wish to comment, please?
Only just to reiterate what I previously said in terms of this application has not been called in by the Welsh Government. Members need to consider this based on its current merits. The Welsh Government are considering whether to call it in, so no decision has been made yet. If planning committee members can just deal with this planning application the same as any other application and deal with it based on its own merits.
Yeah, right.
Thank you, Craig.
Craig.
I'm sure everybody is aware now. Forget at the moment, put at the back of your mind anything about a call-in. We're dealing with this application as we do with any other normal application that comes before us as a planning committee. Councillor Matt Feakin next, please.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, Roger very, very eloquently put the case, and there's nothing else that I could really add to that other than I'd be more than pleased to second it. I mean, there is a significant need in the whole of our county for affordable housing. There aren't many as sustainable locations as Abergavenny as this site can provide. This is providing 100% affordable housing. If it doesn't happen in this method, then it doesn't happen. When we ever go through a normal development process, we're lucky to get through with 20-25% affordable housing. So we've got to bend over backwards to help these sites come forward and ensure that they do come forward. And Andrew put it that it was material consideration. That these points form material considerations, and nevertheless they conform to Planning Policy Wales in any event. So I'd be more than happy to second the proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Feakin. Councillor Louise Brown next, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was looking at the screen that we've got at the moment, and obviously there is a need for affordable housing, but on the there is a slide with the design of the houses, and I just wondered if we could look at that again. Yeah, that one. I just wondered if there could be any improvement on the style, because I don't know the location, but we've said it's near a Grade 1 listed building, and you know, it seems as if it's in a sort of, I don't know, I mean, Councillor Harris will probably know better than me, but it seems as if it's in sort of almost a rural type of location, but the design of the houses are sort of more estate-like, and I would have thought that possibly a more cottage-style design might have been better. And also the conditions in the members area, the reports we've got haven't been updated, and there were no conditions at the bottom of that. So I looked on the public website and there are conditions on that, but there don't seem to be any conditions with regard to the use of materials in this development either. and I just wondered if that could be improved upon a bit in relation to this particular design of accommodation. I appreciate that it has to be affordable accommodation, but on the other hand, you know, we do want good quality, affordable accommodation.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I think that a misconception is taken when it comes to affordable, because usually they have to be built to a far better standard than market housing. There are some very nice affordable housing up the Hereford Road in Abergavenny as you turn right towards onto the Ross Road, some very good ones there.
But I'm just looking at this design. It doesn't look terribly attractive to me, you know, in terms of the landscape and everything else.
I believe it's brick and render, but one thing, as we're on the subject of design, and as you say, it's semi-rural, I do wish that they would put enclosed porches on front or back that would accommodate a bicycle or a wheelchair or a pushchair or something, because when it comes to the interior of these houses, you go straight into a kitchen or something at the back. It doesn't make a very harmonious living space in an evening or a daytime if you have to accommodate both boots and coats, and especially a wheelchair, a cycle, which they encourage people to cycle and walk more. I do wish they would put enclosed porches on a lot of these housing that we're building in the community today. But that's my preference, and also that when you have downstairs toilets, that they should include a shower in it, because Councillor Harris will bear with me on Adult Select Committee, when somebody is in this accommodation for a long time and they need adaptations if they cannot use the stairs or something, it is far more beneficial if they do also have a shower downstairs. Anyway, that said, I will now go to the next hand that is raised, and it's, again, it has come back to Councillor Harris.
Presumably the chair will, the officers will answer the question about design and conditions later.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll take all questions now or comments from the rest of the committee now, please. Councillor Harris.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Only to say that let's get our terminology right. These are going to be built by a registered social landlord, so they're going to be social housing as opposed to the mystical affordable housing, and I think that is important. Whether or not on the design, if we say yes, the officers may wish to talk to the developers and see if the delegated panel can have a chat with them if the committee says yes, go ahead, but we don't like the houses so far. Maybe that could be done. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for raising that point also, Councillor Harris. Anybody else now wish to speak, please?
One comment, Chair.
Councillor Tony Easton, I believe.
Yeah, we haven't got a hand up spot, have we? No, Chair. To come back on the question of affordable housing and social housing, at the present time, these registered landlords are building houses to great standards, better standards than some of the private. In particular, two in my ward, you'd really believe that they were really good standard, and that's what we've got to maintain. So I believe that this development will be of a similar standard as is a housing association. They are required to make sure they are of such standard. Thank you, Chair.
I fully agree. Thank you, Councillor Easton.
I think it was the exterior of them and the design I was talking about. Thank you.
Councillor Woodhouse now, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's just a query. I'd like. I've been looking through the patterns and notes. I can't quite work out the car parking. How that's going to work out. I can see there are some garages and 37 car parking spaces has been referred to. I just wondered if officers could give a bit of explanation as to what will be there for cars, because obviously we have to bear in mind it is on a best route, but people here will be needing to use cars because it is out of town. Even though it's close to the settlement, it is out of town. It's a fair few miles out of Abergavenny. So I'd just like to know that clarified. Also, I think there are there going to be solar panels I've seen it in the notes, but I didn't see it on any of the plans. So obviously I want confirmation that there would be solar panels on these buildings. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
I'll ask Andrew if he could update you on the comments that you've made, Councillor Woodhouse. Andrew, could you come back in?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Chair. And I'll also first to go back to the points raised by Councillor Brown. Yeah, I agree. A condition sample to agree external materials would be appropriate. So if members were minded to approve, we would look to add that condition. I think that's a sensible suggestion. In terms of the design though themselves, so there's a couple of parts. Yes, to Councillor Woodhouse's comment, the solar panels would be on the south facing roof slopes that look within the site, look in on itself. The design though, has been subject to quite a bit of negotiation and amendment. And the materials themselves, though, in terms of roof slate and vertical timber, are high quality materials for a sort of edge of settlement location. So I think having regard to that and its proximity to the listed church, which I would correct myself, I believe there's actually a grade 1 listed church. I think I said grade 2 listed in the presentation, so apologies members, it's grade 1 listed. But I think the design that's involved, the heritage team involved, our landscape officer, it's simple, it's functional, and appropriate to the context. So I think the officers are satisfied that it's an appropriate design solution, notwithstanding the need to agree those materials via proper condition. In terms of the parking spaces, on Councillor Woodhouse's point, if we could go back to the layout, you can see there's sort of, again, it's probably the drawing is blown up slightly. The brown squares you can see to the south of each of the plots, those are the parking spaces that would enable the cars there to pull in and turn off and then leave back through the main entrance, obviously all in a forward gear, but perhaps that's not clearly shown on plan. But yeah, each would be served by sufficient parking and would also be able to turn safely within the site, especially having regard to the sort of numbers we're talking about on this particular site. So hopefully that covers the important points raised by Councillor Brown firstly, and then by Councillor Woodhouse.
Thank you, Andrew. Is there any possibility of negotiating porches on those houses?
Well, some of they do have porches. Are you referring to porches being sort of internally cut off?
So that they would be secure.
Well, we could go back to the applicant for that, and if that was something that members.
I mean, if you've got a bicycle or a pushchair or a wheelchair, and you could accommodate it in a porch that can be locked, like a lot of houses have got them today. I'm just wondering if that could be accommodated, because it's far easier to build that sort of thing from the onset rather than sort of do later on.
Yeah, well, if that's something members wanted to consider if minded to approval, then I guess that's something we could go back to the applicant with. I mean, officers are obviously satisfied as it is, but notwithstanding the any potential calling, is that something that could potentially either agree as officers or through the delegated panel potentially in due course? It's quite a minor change, I suppose.
Yes. Anybody wish to second my proposal on that?
I'd be happy to, Ruth, go to the Delhi panel, if that's okay. Roger did mention it as well, but it would be to.
Right, thank you, Councillor Feakin. So it can come to panel and we can discuss that then with the materials and so on with the Delhi panel. So thank you very much. Anybody else wish now to comment? Then I will take the last.
Sorry, Chair. Could I say that obviously, as a condition, I think I put my hand up about the condition of the delegated panel looking at design features like the porch and so forth. I mean, I appreciate and support the idea of what you've said about bicycles. I mean, there's no cycle rack or no electric charging points or anything in relation to this particular development, and the PPW edition 10 does say that you're supposed to look at walking, cycling and then bus transport, but there doesn't seem to be anything in this report on that particular issue. No,
thank you. I think some of that could come back to Delhi, as we have said. if you're
Okay.
all in agreement with that. So thank you very much for that, Councillor Brown. I believe we've discussed this long enough now and given it a good airing of all sorts of things. And I believe Councillor Roger Harris, I believe you've moved for approval.
Yes, Madam Chair.
And you had a seconder, I believe, in Councillor Feakin.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Right, so I hope now that we will go to the vote. The first vote will be for approval of the application, please. If we could have that in the chat bar now, please, officers.
Can we also make it clear that it includes this extra condition?
It will all include all that we have.
Yeah, there's two extra conditions, aren't there? There's the materials and there's the delegated panel.
Yes, it will all be discussed as we have agreed and has moved now to go to the vote. Thank you.
We've only had 8 responses so far, Chair. 9 now.
Yeah, Chairman, if I may, I'm in agreement, but I haven't seen the panel come up so I can vote for.
Same here, actually, Madam Chair. I haven't either, Madam Chair.
Could you please submit it verbally, Councillor Webb and Councillor Higginson?
I'm in favour.
Thank you of the application, the recommendation of the officers. Thank you.
So 2 more to count then, please, Denzel, for approval.
So that's thank you, Chair. So that in that case, then there have been 12 responses, all for approval. I think it looks like there's still 2 remaining, but regardless of how they vote, it wouldn't change the outcome of the results. So I'm happy to say that that's been approved.
Right.
Could we have a good screen up, please, Madam Chair, for the next vote?
Sorry?
Could we have a proper screen up for the next vote, please?
Yes, hopefully that's what the officers could administer, I'm sure. Is that possible? I don't know if it's Nicola in the office.
Just to say, Chair, that I've got that on my screen already, so
yes, so I
haven't got it.
Yes, Chair, it will be available as long as you've got your chat bar open and you've scrolled down as far as you can go. So if Councillor Webb has got her chat bar open, she should be able to see that.
Right. Okay, thank you. So that has been approved, and so I'm sure we can now carry on to the next application that is on page. Sorry, I won't say the page. The application number of today is 00459, and this is St Thomas's Square, Monmouth. This is an extension of an approval already passed before. So I believe, is it you, Phil, that's presenting this one?
No, it's myself again.
It's back to you,
Chair.
Andrew. Thank you, Andrew.
No, thank you, Chair. Yep, so this is an application that's presented to you today, members, for 2 reasons. Firstly, that the applicant is a close relative of a council employee, and secondly, that there's an objection from a statutory consultee, and in this instance, that is NRW. So the application relates to the Green Dragon Inn, which you can see on screen now, which is, as the Chair has said, just located off St Thomas's Square in the town of Monmouth. And it relates specifically to an existing granary building to the rear of the site. Just move on the next photo. We should have some photos of the granary building. So it's identified there. It's the main pub, and then this outbuilding you can see there with the arrows. Access there off Goldwire Lane. So planning permission was previously granted in 2014 for the change of use of the granary to provide holiday accommodation that we run in conjunction with the existing business. So this current application before you today seeks to vary condition 1 of that consent to allow an additional 12 months with which to start the development. In terms of the plans, a very sort of light touch approach required to facilitate the change of use. I see on screen there a new dormer window to the front elevation, and there's 2 roof lights shown on the rear, and these are all no change since the previous approval. And again, they're a very light touch approach on the side elevation as well. So in terms of the material considerations, I'll just run through those for you, members. And just note on the ground floor, actually, that the accommodation is all, in terms of sleeping accommodation, is all at 1st floor level. So in terms of our considerations, it is within the development boundary for Monmouth, where the conversion of buildings for tourism use is supported in accordance with the objectives of the LDP as set out in policy S8. And in terms of the design, as we've seen, it's on the slides earlier, it's a very light touch approach proposed to the building itself, and the new timber doors and windows are considered by officers appropriate to the location within the Monmouth Conservation Area. And the proposal would therefore preserve the character and appearance of the conservation area. In addition to that, the changes to the building would not result in any unacceptable impact to any third parties' privacy or residential amenity. The issue of flooding, in particular the objection from NRW, the site lies within flood zone C1, and a updated FCA has been submitted with this application. Looking at the LDP, policy SD3 of the LDP sets out that the proposals for highly vulnerable development, which this would be, will not be permitted in areas which may be liable to flooding unless the residential development is for the conversion of upper floors within defined settlement boundaries, or the proposal is to extend and establish tourism, leisure, or educational establishment. And in this instance, the proposal would supplement the existing use of the Green Dragon Inn, and all sleeping accommodation would be contained, as I said earlier, at the upper floor level. A condition would also be imposed that would require an evacuation plan to ensure that the necessary safety arrangements are in place in the event of a flood. So, in terms of other issues you can see summarised on screen, it says it's a sustainable location with good links to the town centre and the bus station, and therefore officers are satisfied that an extension of 12 months to commence the permission is acceptable, and therefore recommended to members, subject to conditions in your report, for approval.
Right, thank you very much again, Andrew. The actual member of that ward is not on the planning committee. I believe the adjoining ward member is Councillor Matt Feekins. If you like to start any of your comments, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Andrew. This obviously is an application that's been before us already, and it's already had a great amount of discussion. It is the position of NRW, of course, that they couldn't support this application without scrapping their position in other areas. So it's unsurprising that they've come forward with their objection. But I don't think in living memory we've ever gone through a period of time that's been so difficult for businesses, let alone pub businesses. So I think we've got to do everything again that we can to help all of the industry where we can. So I have no objection at all, and would very happily recommend the approval as per the officer's recommendation.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Feekin. I believe Councillor Murphy, you are next, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and Councillor Feekins has just said everything I was going to say, so I'd be quite happy to second the approval. Right,
thank you, Councillor Murphy. Anybody else wish to comment? As I said, this is an extension to a planning approval that we've already had. So anybody else wish to comment?
Just one question, Chair.
Councillor Eason.
This representation by NRW was NRW as it is now. Previously was Welsh Water. When the first application was put in, were there any objections from Welsh Water at the time? Because the last flood was in 1979, according to the report. Has anything changed since then between Welsh Water and NRW taking over?
A lot of things have altered as far as flood alleviation in that area. I don't know whether it was before 70, it was bound to be since 70 something, but of course this is upper floor level, it is not at ground level. Fine.
They did ask for evacuation procedures, and I was wondering at what level of flood they were expecting in that area. So 1 in 100 year flood, what a level of flood were they expecting to have the need for an evacuation procedure as such?
Would you answer that, Andrew? Because I think I'd be a loss, considering I know the site very well, but there'll be an awful lot more people in the boat, I should think, if it was along Drivebridge Street.
Yes.
Can you comment at all on the procedure with flooding at all, Andrew?
Not to any great detail, I'm afraid, Chair. I was just trying to look for the comments provided on the previous application that Councillor Eason had alluded to, and I haven't got them in front of me at the moment. But like I said, the same position as previously and the same condition as previous, that you know, with these safeguards in place, say the evacuation plan, in terms of the impact on and potential for human life and well-being, you know, we're satisfied that we're not putting anyone in any undue or unnecessary risk.
Yeah, I fully agree.
Causing risk elsewhere.
Thank you, Chair.
Right.
Lovely.
Thank you. So I don't.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Madam Chair, can I just clarify a few points there? In terms of Councillor Eason expressing Welsh Water being the previous body, it was actually an environmental.
All right. Okay. So, yeah, one end of the blue.
It wasn't Welsh Water, Environment Agency, yes. And now they've altered, so obviously changed the Natural Resources Wales in terms of the statutory body in Wales. But when planning committee members are looking at this application, I think you just need to be aware that it is within a C2. This is a upper floor form of development for accommodation, for holiday accommodation, to assist the business, as Councillor Feakins has suggested and mentioned. And there is a condition on this application that a full flood evacuation plan will be submitted. So that would be considered in association with our emergency services team. Ian Hardman will review that and just ensure that it's acceptable. So that will be covered by a condition of this recommendation from officers. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Craig, for that clarity on that matter. Right, I don't think there's any real need to discuss this any further, so I think I'll go straight to the vote. As Councillor Matt Feakin has moved for approval, and did Phil Murphy second that?
I did, Chair.
Right, so please go to the chat bar now and you can place your vote.
Again, Chair, we've only seemed to have 10 responses, so I think there's 11, 12 now. 12 responses, 11.
I'm content with the recommendation, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Higginson, have you been able to vote, or do you wish to do it?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I have voted.
Well done. Thank you very much, Councillor Higginson. And Denzel will, as he's just suggested, that it has gained approval. So there's no need to go to a vote for anything else. Thank you very much indeed, members. We will now go to the next application, and I believe that we do have some declarations of interest for this one, and this is 02076 62 Chepstow Road, Caldicot. Thank you. Who's
Before I leave, Chair, how will you call us back in?
I believe an officer would do that. Is that possible?
By email or?
One of us in Democratic Services will call them back in. We will dial the members back in, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Richard. Are you aware of that now, Councillor Eason?
Yeah, fine.
Right, thank you. So please watch for the email, or they're going to dial you. Thank you very much indeed. We now go to the next application.
Thank you, Chair. I'm presenting this one. This is at
Thank you, Phil.
Chepstow Road, Caldicot. I just go to the slide. Slide. Yeah, so this is a site members will be familiar with, having dealt with an application for a house in multiple occupation in 2019 at this site, and visited the site.
Sorry, Phil. Councillor Higginson, your camera is still on. Councillor Higginson?
I'm here, Madam Chair.
Could you please switch your camera off?
Yes, off.
Yes. Right, thank you. Carry on now, please, Phil.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so members will be familiar with this site, having visited it before making a decision on it previously to allow a C4 use on the site. Condition 5. So as I said, in October 2019, planning permission was granted to change the use of the property to a C4 use class. It's a house in multiple occupation to help tackle homelessness within the southern part of the county. 62 Chepstow Road will thus be used for shared family accommodation, will be managed directly by the accommodation staff in the council's housing options team. Condition 5 of that permission required that a management plan was submitted to and approved by the planning authority before the building is actually used for the HMO. And the current application seeks a discharge of that condition, so it seeks to obtain permission for the management plan. And it must be noted also, and this is an important aspect, that an application for a non-material amendment under the reference number DM 2020-01269 has been submitted to amend the wording of a separate condition, condition 3 of the original application. And that requests that the wording of condition 3 now reads that, and I'll quote, "No more than 6 people shall occupy the building at any one time, and it shall be occupied by families only, in brackets, including lone parent families, close brackets, and no lone adults," unquote. This will address the residents' concerns that single adults might otherwise occupy the building. And as an update to the committee report, that application for a non-material amendment is now valid and is under consideration. The management plan submitted in respect of this application, which is before you, reflects that the property will only be used to accommodate families. No more than 6 people would occupy the building at any one time, and it shall be occupied by families only. In terms of the management plan, the terms of the management plan are set out in the report, and I don't intend to run through all of that detail here, although it is pertinent to respond to some of the key concerns of residents. So the housing options team will have control over who occupies the property, and they will vet the potential occupants to assess their suitability. The antisocial behaviour policy, which is as part of the management plan, is included as a precaution, but is fully intended to manage the property obviously carefully and considerately. Any applicant considered unsuitable will not be allocated accommodation at this address, and alternative arrangements will be made for them. MHA, who own the property, has an adopted policy for the removal of tenants if any problems arise, and this has been tried and tested on similar schemes. In addition, MHA will not allow any subletting of the property. The management plan states that MCC staff and visiting professionals will not be allowed to use the drive to park, with the exception of maintenance staff, and that the accommodation assistant will monitor parking. No bollards are required to restrict access on the driveway, and residents of number 62 will be allowed to use the drive to park a vehicle subject to agreement by the council. It is not, however, expected that many of the occupiers of number 62 will own cars and expect to park them on the site. Local residents have also expressed concern that number 62 Chepstow Road would become an office space for members of the Housing Association or MCC housing staff. This is not part of the plan for the building. Some staff who are visiting the dwelling, or the property rather, to check in on the residents may now wish to stay a little longer to catch up with their work. But this will be an informal arrangement, and members of staff will not visit number 62 with the sole purpose of working there. Number 62 will not become an office or a hub facility. So to conclude, the management plan and the level of detail is considered sufficient to ensure the building is occupied in a manner that does not harm the amenities of the occupiers of the building or local residents. The plan does ensure that the use of the premises accords with the objectives of policy EP1 of the LDP, and the application is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Phil. As described, we have been there several times, I believe, down in Caldicot. Is the local member able to speak on this, or are they one of those?
If I could just say, Chair, there is some public speaking on this proposal. There's been a letter that needs to be read out from 2 local residents, which I take the opportunity to do so now.
Yeah, you're going to do that yourself, Phil?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Phil. You carry on.
Okay, thank you. Pardon me? Your monitor. Right, okay, that's great. I could just get a bit of echo there. Thank you. Right, I shall read out this this letter. It's sent on behalf of D. Lund and S. Parish. Checking what the rest of it is. Sorry. Sorry. Once again, you have placed your own wording amendment to this proposed management plan. The Monmouthshire County Council Planning Committee proposed and seconded that the terminology, and in quotes, no single people, quotes, unquote, will be placed in this building. At a later date, at a meeting held in Caldicot Town Council meeting room alongside Monmouthshire Housing Association officials, MHA stated to Craig O'Connor that they, as the applicants, and in quotes, had no objections to the planning committee's proposal and statement of wording of no single people to be placed in this property. Craig O'Connor stated that he would get this amendment placed within 21 days, but likely to be within the week, quoted and documented by Craig at this meeting, and yet again failed to do so and reneged on this. The management plan should state, as proposed, no single people will be placed within this dwelling. It will be used for families only, with a maximum of 6 people. MHA, the applicant of this property, stated at the 20th of August 2020 meeting that they have no objections to these conditions or statements, and Karen Tarbucks, their legal representative, stated that the wording no single people should be included in the management plan, and there would be a clear breach of the law if any single people are placed there. This has still not been actioned. Kate Young and Craig O'Connor decided, as stated in an email, that they did not like this and you would change it going against planning approval committee documented agreement. What right and authority do you have to alter what the planning committee and the applicants have both approved? It certainly brings into question the total honesty and integrity of the Monmouthshire County Council Planning Department, and it's obviously dishonest and unprofessional members within this area. With the current amount and proposed increases in house building within the Caldicot area, it beggars belief that more suitable properties cannot be found when families each have their own front door and garden area rather than shared accommodation, which is fully illustrated by the current pandemic and does not work for both health, safety and social reasons. As this property is a blind corner alongside the steepness of this driveway, it is still not compliant and presents a hazard to pedestrians, cyclists and other road users. You as a council have a duty of care to all those involved in this decision and are accountable for this. There is a danger and you have repeatedly recognised this danger, and now this is to become an active travel route of Monmouthshire with no alterations undertaken for the safety of the whole community. As you have recognised this hazard and yet not acted upon it, should any incident occur, you are now personally liable for ignoring your duty of care within the community. As this property is owned by MHA and intended for use by MCC, the legal representative stated, if it did not conform, it would not be offered to MCC to lease, as they have a duty of care to their employees and MCC staff, public services and any future tenants. Occupiers' liability and occupants' liability. Responsibilities as owners, if not safe, then we can't use. We will take this away and look next Wednesday on return from annual leave and we'll respond. They are still waiting for an update on those comments. The unsafe incline of the driveway itself, self-inspection will illustrate the problem that exists. MHA stated at the 20th of August 2020 meeting, they would investigate this problem and inform residents of their findings prior to the next meeting. This has still not been actioned. Continual monitoring of this property suggests that MCC have an intention to use this as a regular place of work, often known as a hub, which indicates, as well as a domestic property, commercial uses and regulations come into play, which again affects the total community of the surrounding area and was not declared in the original planning application. Whereas we as residents do not object to the property being used for a single family, this current management plan is flawed and continues to be presented in a deceitful manner. Regards, Dealand, Ness Parish. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Phil. I believe I'll ask Craig to come in first to answer some of those comments. Thank you, Phil. Craig?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, just wanted to provide some comments and respond to some of the questions and queries within the comments from the local residents there, and to remind Planning Committee of what's in front of them today. So the planning consent has been granted for this property to be used as a house of multiple occupancy for C4 use for a maximum of 6 people and for families only. That has been determined by the Planning Committee. The discharge condition application has been put before Planning Committee on Planning Committee's request today to ensure that the way that the HMO would function and be managed is considered to be acceptable by the Planning Committee. So today we are solely looking at whether this management plan is acceptable or not. Local residents have continued to express concern that the condition on the planning permission issued is not what the Planning Committee requested, and that has just been mentioned in the local residents' comments. This dispute relates specifically to the reference to no single people, and this complaint has been thoroughly investigated, and it has been found to be upheld in terms of the wording of the condition. So condition 3 on decision notice states that no more than 6 people shall occupy the building at any one time, and it shall be occupied by families only. The investigation that looked into the local residents' concerns found that the condition as worded does exactly what the committee requested. It limits the use of the property to families only. Single parent families would be allowed under this condition. However, single adults on their own would not be allowed. This is what Planning Committee members requested and what committee voted for. And this was clear. If you rewatch the Planning Committee meeting, you will see that Planning Committee clearly decided that the HMO would be used for families only. The condition on the decision notice concedes with exactly what the Planning Committee voted for in words and in spirit of what was intended. And to reiterate that this means that this would be for families, including single parents with their children would be acceptable, but individual adults would not be allowed to reside there. The inclusion of the term families but no single people, as the local residents requested, would make the condition ambiguous, because in terms of relationship status, a single parent is a single person. We want to allow single parents to reside at the property, but not lone adults. That is what we believe the local residents are seeking to do. At a meeting hosted by the Town Council last August, this issue was raised again regarding single parents, and a representative of MHA did agree to include the wording within the management plan following discussions with MHA. The wording has now been proposed to be amended, and that has been proposed via a non-material amendment. And in the management plan, you will see that the council is considering this non-material minor amendment to change the wording of the condition, which we believe is still in the spirit of what Planning Committee voted on. So the new proposed wording to meet the local residents' concerns is that no more than 6 people shall occupy the building at any one time, and it shall be occupied by families only, including lone parent families and no lone adults. Local residents have been fully consulted on the management plan, and this new wording that refers to lone adults is now being considered as via the non-material minor amendment application. But that is a separate planning application process. This application in front of you today is clearly outlining to review the management plan, and it clearly states there that it would be for families only. And I'm here to clarify that the condition does control that and is in the spirit of what Planning Committee has said. And the only reason that no single people is on there because of the ambiguity that would place on it. In terms of the concerns with regards to the non-material amendment and local residents outlining that, I did suggest that that wording would be changed within 28 days. That was on the precursor that the non-material planning application was valid. Unfortunately, that application wasn't valid for a significant amount of time, and it's only become valid in December. That is why on the 22nd of December, that information has been consulted on, and the non-material minor amendment is now out on consultation. But that will be determined swiftly following the consultation process. As my colleague Philip has just expressed, in terms of the hub concerns, this certainly would not be a hub. This would just be a minor agile working space for the housing officer to do some emails and phone calls from. If there was anything else in terms of an agile working space, they would require a change of use. So that's certainly not the case. That's what's being presented before you. So I just wanted to clarify that for the planning committee members, Madam Chair, and just to outline that this condition is for families only at the moment, and the new condition that's being proposed as part of the non-material member would retain that in perpetuity.
Right, thank you very much for that, Craig. The first member of the committee who wishes to place comment, I believe, is Councillor Feakin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Craig, for that clarity. I've for myself find it a little bit choking when we're looking to condition our neighbours so ruthlessly, as far as I'm concerned. I did find some of the language within that sort of discriminatory against single people and single families. I believe the way that Craig has just explained that, and to cope with the fact that families can include single parents. I'm a single parent myself, and hopefully that speaks to some of the neighbours' concerns as well, that if you had a family where you had two adults in that relationship and one of them were to leave, that you wouldn't expect the other partner that's remaining to have to leave as well, who would then at that stage be a single parent. So I'm fully on page with the way Craig has explained it just then, and I'm more than happy to recommend the officer's recommendation, or to support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Feakin. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ironically, it's the first time that I've had a chance to look at this application, and not being present for previous meetings, and I'm basically appalled at the vitriol that I'm looking at on some of the pages here of objections. You know, looking at it, you would assume that the house is going to be full of criminals, drug dealers, and goodness knows what. For example, Chepstow Road is a nice residential road with nice people. There is a lack of police presence in the area, or an increase in the crime rate will occur. I mean, this is appalling. We have a duty as an authority to look after vulnerable people, and I'm assuming the people going into a house of multiple occupation like this are vulnerable, and it makes me sad that you know, it makes me wonder who's going to be the safer, the residents or well, I won't say any more than that. I'm just appalled at the vitriol that I've seen before me. I have no hesitation in seconding Matt Feakin's approval. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Louise Brown, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just looking at the conditions in the report itself, and I assume that the reasons would also be added to the change of condition. But when Craig was speaking about it, he was saying that it's in perpetuity, but the original condition includes in perpetuity, but the amended condition doesn't include in perpetuity at the end of it. And I would have thought it would be helpful to include that. In terms of the actual accommodation, because I am Vice Chair of Adults and we discussed the homelessness situation, my understanding was that it was primarily looked at in terms of the need for family accommodation, and I don't think that in a sense that it detracts from its usage to actually state that, but I'm not quite clear whether or not there's going to be a management plan as well, because presumably management doesn't just cover the occupiers of the property, it covers other issues as well. So I just wanted that clarifying, because I wasn't quite sure whether there has been a management plan, because management involves other issues, not just who's actually occupying the property. So there's two questions there. Firstly, will there also be a management plan condition, or are you incorporating this within it? And secondly, why doesn't it also say in perpetuity, as that was stated at the start of this section on this planning application? Thank you.
Thank you. Phil, do you want to
Madam Chair, could I say something about this, please? I tried to get the I tried to request control, but I don't know what's happened.
Right, Councillor Higginson speaking now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. It is in my ward, and I am concerned about certainly what they term the blind corner, and it is, in fact, and I have serious concerns about that. And I appreciate the fact that members have had a look at it, but in my view, I still don't think it, because of primarily traffic issues, really, and there will be traffic coming up and down that very narrow drive, and I have concerns about numerous cars coming down here as opposed to one family car. So I have concerns, and I appreciate there's not much can be done about them, but I think that if there was no one that had a car there, then I might be to some extent in favour of it, but there's never a guarantee that there won't be a number of cars up on that house, and as a consequence of that, I have real concerns about its use and the numbers of. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Higginson. But Councillor Higginson, if there was one family there, they could still have up to 4 cars or whatever, and you couldn't.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Madam Chairman.
Right, thank you, Councillor Higginson.
Madam Chair, can I come in there just to answer a few queries?
Yes, certainly, Craig.
In terms of Councillor Brown's comments regarding what's in front of them today, so what is in front of planning committee members today is the management plan. It is the management plan for the site. It's a discharge of condition to approve the management plan that is in front of members as part of this planning application. So it deals with the parking, the fire and safety aspects of the development, etc. So that is all outlined within this management plan, which officers are recommending is that we approve. The condition that the site will be used for families only. That is what planning committee have determined that it's been decided, and that is on the condition at the moment. And then the non-material amendment to reword that so no lone individuals can stay there is part of a separate planning application. The non-material amendment that's not in front of planning committee today. What's in front of planning committee today is the management plan to deal with those issues. So that's what planning committee are voting on, to approve that management plan. In terms of the word in perpetuity, sorry, that was a bit of a misstep by myself in terms of that wording wouldn't need to be on there. If it says families only, that's all who can stay in it. So that condition would be sufficient for that. It says families only, and that would be retained. There's no need for the word perpetuity. Sorry, so that was my fault. Sorry about that. Regards to Councillor Higginson's comments with regards to the parking and the blinds block, that has been looked at when we looked at the original planning application. So highways officers have had a look at this. They didn't raise any objections to the existing property, and as Councillor the Chair, Councillor Howard has said that sorry. Councillor Edwards, sorry, that the access could be used if it was a C3 property with a large family, and they could have 4, 5, 6 houses with teenagers, etc., and could be used as normal. But in terms of the highways aspects of this, that has been looked at previously when the planning committee approved it, and highways raised no objection to the proposed development for the HMO C4. So I just want to remember the planning committee members today are looking at the management plan and approving whether this management plan in front of them is acceptable. And obviously, as officers, we're recommending that it is acceptable. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Right, thank you, Craig. I think that has been explained very clearly from you, Craig, and I think we should all know by now exactly what we are voting on. So I think, as with all of that clarity, I think we could go now straight to the vote. Thank you.
Not come up, Madam Chair.
I have gone to the vote, Councillor Higginson.
Yeah, what I'm saying, Madam Chairman, is it's not come up on the screen.
Right, okay, so do you verbally wish to give your submission?
Yeah, I'm against it.
Right, thank you, Councillor Higginson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm for the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Webb.
So we have 8 responses in the chat bar plus the 2 that be given verbally, which gives there's 9 responses now, sorry. So that gives 11 in total. I believe only 12 members are voting on this particular application. So we have 10 for approval and 1 against approval. So that's clearly been passed as well, Madam Chair.
Right, thank you very much for that, Denzel. So that has been approved. Thank you, all members. We will now go to the next application on the agenda, and this is the Glenveagh Discoid 00855. I'm hoping the members that have declared interest on the last application have now been able to join the committee.
We have indeed, Chair.
Right, thank you very much indeed, Councillor Murphy. And who else was it that declared? The Councillor Easton, was it? Is he back on board?
No.
Councillor Easton, are you with us now?
We're trying to bring Councillor Eason in, Chair, if you just be with us a moment.
Okay, thank you, Richard.
He should be in now.
Right, I will continue then.
I'm in now, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Easton. Right, thank you. We now go to this one, Glenveagh Discoid 00855. Thank you. Who's doing this one?
I will be chair, hopefully.
Is that Helen?
It is.
Right, please state your name and introduce your title, please, Helen, and welcome to joining the planning committee. You're very brave.
Thank you, Chair. For members who don't know me, I am Helen Hinton. I'm Senior Planning Officer for the Southern Area and the Case Officer for this application. This is an application principally for a proposed outbuilding for ancillary and incidental use to the main dwelling, which is known as the CUM, and regularisation of the use of the existing dwelling to create combined private property and a charitable training retreat centre, providing therapy classes in association with short-term residential. So the slide on screen is now the application site. The blue line indicates the applicant's land holding, which includes residential curtilage and wider areas of woodland. The site, the subject of the outbuilding, is in the southern part on the left-hand side of the screen, and the dwelling is also outlined in red, which is in the northern part of the screen. Bill, if you can move on. Okay, so this is aerial indications of the application site. You can see the area, the application site is on the valley floor and is heavily wooded to both the west and the east. Residential properties to the north and south of the site, and a large farm property known as Cum Farm over on the far east. You could move on, Phil. Again, just aerial shots showing the positioning of the buildings relative to each other. These are floor plans of the existing buildings on site. So the plans on the left are for an existing annex, which is positioned to the rear of the main property. This provides 3 units, 3-bedroom accommodation split between 2 different parts of the building, and the floor plans on the right relate to the dwelling. It's a large property, approximately 3 stories, so with basement level, principal accommodation provided at ground floor level, and then further bedrooms in the upper levels of the dwelling. 6 bedrooms in all to be used, which are used by guests the site, and then the applicant also retains private quarters within that in terms of a bedroom and bathroom facilities. Phil, if you could flick on. So that is just the details of the existing dwelling, and you can see the owner's accommodation on the right hand side of the screen. We can flick forward. This is the proposed site layout plan. So the building would be in the southern part of the residential curtilage. There's a very large outbuilding that's proposed. Access would be via an existing driveway, which is immediately adjacent to the northern site of the proposed building. A treatment plant for foul sewage would be to the north of the immediate building, and attenuation pond for surface water flooding to the south. The brook is immediately adjacent to the northwest elevation of the building. Move on. These are proposed elevations of the buildings. The top one is an indication as to what the building would look like from Cum Lane, which is immediately adjacent to the site and provides access to residential properties to the north. The top picture is what the building would look like with the shutters open, and the bottom one is just with the shutters closed. So you can see it's quite a simple structure, but it is very large. These are the gable elevations of the building as you would look at it from the dwelling. So the driveway would cut across the front of the property, and again, top one of shutters open and the bottom one with shutters closed. Move on. The top picture in this instance is the southern gable elevation of the building, which would be visible from users of the lane to the west side of the site. And then the bottom picture is an indication of the eastern elevation, which would only be visible from the applicant's land holding. The top elevation obviously indicates the extent of topography fall across the site, so it's very steeply falling from east to west as it comes down towards the brook. Well, can move on. The internal accommodation, as indicated here, would comprise an entrance, porchway and lobby leading through to a kitchen, and then a larger gathering space in the southwestern part of the building. One additional disabled parking space would be provided immediately adjacent to the northern gable elevation of the property. And if we can move on. And then this would be the first floor accommodation within the building. So there's a seminar space provided at the north end of the building. The space in the southwestern part of the building would actually be double height. So there'd be actually no floor space within that area. So it's only half use at first floor level. These are the architect's visual representations of the site. So this is viewing the site from the lane south towards Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgoed. And this is viewing the site from the southern end. So this is the proposed building. You can see the stream in the foreground, the lane on the left-hand side, and the applicant's residential property in the rear. And that's the view of the site as existing. So exactly the same as the previous image, but without the building in, obviously. The works, and this is the site of the proposed building within the residential curtilage. The garden was cleared in approximately 2018, and the applicant built some retaining walls, but this originally formed part of a raised allotment kind of planted area. They commenced works having taken advice from a different source, and then stopped works once the authority contacted them, obviously advising that what they had done required planning permission, and they've obviously chosen to await the result of this application without doing any further work to site. Again, this is a view of the site from within the applicant's own property. So this is stood on the internal driveway. The embankment would be to the left-hand side of the property, and the brook is on the right-hand side, just adjacent to the hedge. Again, shots internally within the site, so showing the change of levels and its positioning relative to the brook. This is a view taken from the lane itself. As you can see, the top part of the retaining wall can be seen at this point, and the building would be visible above that retaining wall. That is an image of the existing dwelling showing the driveway leading up from the southern part up onto the dwelling, and it's proposed that parking would be provided along the length of the driveway. This is an image of the existing dwelling, showing obviously that its height and scale and just general arrangement. This is an additional parking area that the applicant has developed in the northern part of the site. This is to the rear of the dwelling and the annex, in the very northern end of the site, and it's capable of accommodating approximately 6 to 8 cars. This is the existing driveway that leads from that northern parking area down towards the rear of the rear of the dwelling and the existing annex. Again, capable of providing more parking. And that's it. I'm going to go back. So this application is presented to committee following the receipt of public objection. As outlined, this is a large detached property which sits in a large curtilage in the valley known as Cwm Valley, which is just over 1 kilometre northeast of Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgoed. The proposal is for the erection of a multi-purpose outbuilding to be used to provide therapy classes and retreat facilities in association with the business already operated from the site. It also seeks to regularise the use of the dwelling as a private property and as a charitable training retreat centre with associated short-term residential C2 use. The proposed outbuilding would measure approximately 22 metres long, 8 metres deep, with a maximum height of 6.7 metres, falling to 3.8 at eaves level. Internally, the accommodation has already been previously described, and externally the building would be finished with treated timber cladding and a grey metal sheeted roof. And conditions with regards to samples of the external material finish have been recommended. The outbuilding would be located approximately 75 metres to the south of the dwelling, near the local brook and the road leading through the Cwm. The proposed building would utilise the existing point of access which serves the residential property, and as a whole the site is capable of accommodating approximately 20 parking spaces. The applicant purchased the site approximately 7 years ago, and as specified, they operate a charitable enterprise which offers spiritual retreat opportunities to church leaders and teams. The limit on group size is fixed by the sleeping accommodation available in the main house and adjacent annex, and on average guests stay 3 days or 2 nights. It is the intention of this application to provide a barn-like flexible space that can accommodate a variety of group activities, including dining and food preparation, which is currently all taking place within the main dwelling. As a result of the use, which is considered to be tourism, the application is considered compliant with policies S8, S10, S11, RE6, T2 and E3, and is acceptable in principle. As no alterations are proposed to the external appearance of the main dwelling, that aspect is considered acceptable in terms of visual impact. A number of public concerns have been raised with regards to the scale and design of the proposed outbuilding. Whilst a request has been made to reduce the scale of the building, the applicant has advised that the structure is necessary to support the existing enterprise and has requested the application be determined in its current form. Although relatively large, it is considered the design of the building has drawn inspiration from simple and functional barn-type structures and would be of a size and scale proportionate to the existing dwelling and wider land holding. Although visible from the lane to the west, on balance, it is considered the development would appear subservient and proportionate in massing relative to the main dwelling and land holding, and would make use of external materials that would emphasise its secondary and ancillary use. Although criteria B of policy L1 specifies new buildings should, wherever possible, be located within or close to existing groups of buildings, in this instance, siting is limited by the linear form of the site on the valley floor and the topography, which falls steeply from west and east towards the property. Given the position of the building adjacent to the main driveway and the consistent boundary features along the western edge, it is considered the development would appear as a logical part of the residential curtilage. As a minimum distance of 280 metres would be maintained between the outbuilding and the closest residential properties, it is considered the proposal would not have a detrimental impact on residential amenity as a result of any increased overshadowing, loss of light, increased overlooking or infringement of privacy. Following consultation, the Council's Highways Department has raised no objection to the application, noting that the site has a lengthy private drive and sufficient parking arrangements, and they confirm in their consideration that the proposal is not detrimental to the safety and capacity of the immediate highway. Given the size of the outbuilding and the facilities within, it would be possible for the outbuilding and dwelling to be used independently of each other, which in turn could have a detrimental impact on highway safety and amenity. As a result, it is considered necessary to condition that the outbuilding only be used in conjunction with the CUM. However, a further condition is also considered necessary to manage the permission in the event of a different business taking over the property and introducing a similar use which does not involve a material change, but would be less compatible with the surroundings in respect of neighbour or noise impact. As such, as part of the late representation, a condition with regards to a management plan of the site has been recommended, and the wording of that condition can be found in late correspondence. While objectors have questioned the need for the proposed outbuilding given the availability of other facilities in the area, it is noted that providing the building within the curtilage would allow the space to be used only in conjunction with the applicant's business throughout the year and would reduce vehicle movements to and from the site to the benefit of highway safety. Following consultation, the Council's ecology team have raised no objections subject to conditions with regards to the submission of a construction environmental management plan, the prevention of vegetation removal during bird nesting season, lighting conditions and details of biodiversity net gain. Although within a C2 flood zone, the application does not propose any residential accommodation and as such has been categorised by Natural Resources Wales as less vulnerable development. Following the submission and review of a flood consequences assessment, which included modelling data, Natural Resources Wales have raised no objection. So on the basis of all the information available, the application is considered acceptable in policy terms and is not harmful to material planning considerations, therefore recommended for approval subject to conditions. And that's, if I can hand back to you, Madam Chair.
Oh gosh, well, to jump in feet first, I should think on that one. You have been very, very professional, expertly described all of the conditions and all the application. So very well done to you and welcome to presenting again with the Planning Committee. I believe now that this is it in Councillor Murphy's ward?
It is indeed, Chair.
Right, I'll leave you to kick off then, Councillor Murphy, and I'm sure you agree with me that was an expert presentation. Thank you, Helen, and thank you, Phil.
Yes, and thank you, Helen, because you saved me saying an awful lot of what I was going to say. You can tell from the objections this is not popular locally. It's not the best location, but as Helen said, given the site constraints, there is no alternative position within the curtilage that they can actually utilise for this. So no, I'm not a great supporter of it, but and I can identify with all of the problems that have been raised by the objectors. But I have concluded that it does lend itself to the activities that come. Although I'm pleased that there will be a management plan tied to the house. I think that's essential because it would restrict the amount of use that it can be put to, other than that envisaged at the moment. If members are minded to approve, then I would like to see the timber cladding of this either in larch or something, so it will silver down. I think it would be important that the cladding doesn't stand out. If it was stained or something, it would be far more obtrusive within that setting, because it is a particularly attractive walk and a lot of people use it. There are concerns about flooding in the valley, but this is going to be subject to a SUDS application, and I see that there is an attenuation pond there. An awful lot of water comes down that valley, so that's something that we're going to have to keep a very close eye on. So, Madam Chair, as I say, not the prettiest of buildings and not the best of locations, but it does fit the criteria and lends itself to the activities at the come, which are more or less, as Helen said, based on the church and as a retreat for people who really seem to get a great deal of benefit out of the activities there. So I think that's probably all I need to say.
Right, thank you, Councillor Murphy. And I dare say with all the upheavals with COVID, that a lot of people are suffering very much mentally with a lot of these things. Perhaps a lot of people would look for that sort of accommodation for a day or two. And of course, it's in a very, what I would call a tranquil position. Not that I know the area very, very well. But anybody else wish now to come forward for comments, please?
Please, Chair.
Councillor, is that Councillor Eason?
Yes, please, Chair. I got a croaky throat. I've read the report, and somewhere in the report I thought I saw the size of the building being 3 or 4 meters high by 6 meters high. It doesn't seem to show that on the illustration we've been given. Am I correct? I can't find it in the report, but I saw it somewhere. But the other question was about the disposal of wastewater. How efficient would the treatment plant be, because this is a very delicate ecostructure, the Cwm Valley. I do believe that fish are working their way back up there now over the years since it's been clean, and I'd hate to see the Castroggy, which comes all the way down through into Caldicot or through to the Nevern, polluted by any failure of a system further up the valley. So could those two questions be answered, please? Can you highlight that, please, Helen?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Eason. Looking through the report, the proposed section 1.3 proposal description does refer to the building being 22 by 8 with a maximum height of 6.7 falling to 3.8 at eaves level. I wonder whether it might be that you were referring to in terms of the height, but it is a large, it can't be denied that this is a very large building. Yeah. But it is set within a very large curtilage. In terms of waste disposal, the scheme will be the subject of SUDS consent because it's in excess of 100 square metres. Well, obviously, our SUDS team would be reviewing the suitability of that. In terms of the foul water disposal, they are proposing a new facility, and the suitability of that facility would be reviewed and assessed by Natural Resources Wales. There is a need for them to register with Natural Resources Wales for that facility. So unfortunately, I don't have the specific and technical information, but I would rely on those guys to give their necessary support for an appropriate facility.
Thank you, Chair. So on the basis of Councillor Murphy's comments, I'm inclined to look to support it, but I am concerned that whatever system they put in for disposal of waste in terms of water is really a good structure, because as I say, that river, they call it a river, that brook is very important to the ecology of the area, and I'd hate to see it polluted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I believe no matter what industry is in the countryside, they're very hot on making sure that they monitor all sort of brooks and streams these days. And of course, we are always subjected to that as a farm. So I'm sure that that will be regulated to anybody's concern at all. Thank you. Anybody else? Sorry, I'm just looking for raised hands. I've had different comments in there, but no more raised hands. Anybody wish to comment, please? No one else wish to comment at all? Right, how do you move then, Councillor Murphy? If you want to go to the vote, if nobody else wishes to comment?
Approval, Chair.
Do you have a seconder?
I second that, Chair.
Right, thank you. We'll go straight to the vote then if there's no more discussion. So would you please put your vote into the chat bar now when it has come forward?
Approval, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Webb.
So we've now had 11 responses, including one verbal response, Chair. 10 are for approval, 1 is for abstention. And so that motion has passed. I think there's possibly still 4 left to vote, but in any event, it can't be overturned. So that's passed. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Thank you very much for that, Denzel. So that's for approval. We will now go on to the next application, and I'm inundated by paperwork here on the desk. This one now is application 01157, and this is at Shire Newton. Thank you very much indeed. I'm not sure, is Craig, Andrew, who's putting this one forward?
It's me, it's Amy.
Amy, thank you, Amy, sorry.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. You'll be pleased to know this is the last application of committee this afternoon. Yes, my name is Amy Longford. I'm the Heritage and DM Area Manager. So this application is DM 2020. Have we got the slides there? Yeah. DM 2020 01157, and it's for the demolition of the existing dwelling and construction of a replacement dwelling at Red Farm on Crick Road in Shire Newton. So the application is presented to you today at the request of Councillor Brown. So Red Farm is located just to the southeast of Shire Newton, to the north of the Crick Road. The property in question is a mobile home, as you can see in the picture here. The chalet or mobile home is in a poor state of repair and requires some work in order to make it habitable. The photographs show the building in its current state, sat within its grounds and with a number of large trees. And I think the next photograph will show us the current access arrangements. So we can stay here just for a second. So the application seeks permission for a replacement dwelling on the site. So it's important to note here that the planning history on the site, and I'll refer to these pertinent applications. So in May 1997, temporary planning permission was granted on appeal for the mobile home for 3 years. This permission had a condition requiring the removal of the building after the expiration of these 3 years. However, the chalet/mobile home was not removed, and 16 years later, in 2016, a certificate of lawful use was submitted for the retention of the mobile home as a residential building on the site. This was approved on the basis that the building had been in situ and lived in for more than 10 years post the expiration of the temporary permission in 2000. The building and the use of the site by default became immune for enforcement action and was therefore considered to be lawful. This decision was supported by sufficient evidence of the continued residential use. In legal terms, the time period and the applications permitted the residential use of the building on the site in perpetuity. Despite the construction of the building, the residential use is permitted, and therefore policy H5, which specifically refers to replacement dwellings in the open countryside, now applies. The building is classed as a mobile home, which explicitly stated in the certificate of lawfulness. It could be lawfully replaced with another mobile home or a caravan without the need for express permission. Under the Caravan Sites and Control of Development Act 1990, supplemented by Section 13 of the Caravan Sites 1968, the definition of a caravan is provided and specifically sets out some maximum size parameters. The size of a caravan is defined as being up to 20 metres in length, 6.8 metres wide and 3 metres high, which provides a cubic volume of 415 cubic metres. Therefore, the mobile home on the site can legally be replaced with another mobile home up to 415 cubic metres without the need for permission. So if we could just move on to the next slide. So a further planning application was submitted and approved in 2018 for the replacement dwelling, which measured 443 cubic metres. And the slide here shows you the approved dwelling. As stated, given the residential use of the site, policy H5 applies. So in principle, a replacement dwelling was considered acceptable, subject to the usual material considerations. So these approved plans show a 2-storey cottage with a single-storey side lean-to. The cottage has a relatively simple and unoffensive design, which is not out of character with the landscape and is of a bulk, form, size and scale that respects its setting. Therefore, at present, the applicant can either implement the existing permission for replacement dwelling of 443 cubic metres, as you can see here, or replace the current building with a new mobile home of a maximum of 415 cubic metres. Let's move to the next slide, please. So the application before us today is for a replacement dwelling. The initial submission was much larger dwelling of approximately 640 cubic metres. However, this was considered to be far too large and not compliant with the criteria set out in policy H5. On the basis that the applicant has permission for a replacement dwelling, which could be implemented, as we've just seen, or they could replace the mobile home with another mobile home of 415 cubic metres, officers considered that a suitable approach would be to limit the size of any replacement dwelling to that of the prescribed maximum size of the mobile home, which we discussed is 415 cubic metres. So this slide now shows that the proposals have been reduced in size significantly in line with the officer's advice, the extant permissions in place and the legal definition of a caravan. The building has been designed to be of a traditional form and size of cottage in line with the criteria in policy H5, and as per the previous approval, the cottage is of 2 stories. It now measures 7.2 metres by 10.7 metres with an eaves height of 4.6 and a ridge height of 6.4. It has a cubic volume of 407 cubic metres. It is considered to be of a modest size, similar to that of what it replaces, and essentially when considering the fallback position of a caravan of 415 cubic metres could be put on the site. The design of the building is simple and not out of character with the landscape. It is proposed to be finished in render with stone elements and a slate roof. The next slide, if we can move on a second please, shows the site layout of the proposed dwelling, which is proposed to occupy the same position as the existing on site, albeit rotated by about 45 degrees. The site plans show an additional landscaping and biodiversity enhancement proposed, which are considered to be acceptable by the landscape and ecology officers. In addition, the application has not invited any objection from any main consultees. Following amendments, specifically from landscape and biodiversity, all officers have been satisfied with the proposal. It is considered, however, by officers that as proposed, this is the maximum volume of building that be acceptable on the site, on the basis of the previous planning history and the current policy. To that end, it's considered necessary that any approval be conditioned with a removal of permitted development rights in relation to Part 1, Class A to F. So no enlargements, improvements or any other alterations to the dwelling house or any outbuildings should be erected or constructed. This is considered necessary to ensure that the building retains an appropriate size and scale in its context. So, in summary, given the planning history, the significant reduction in size of the proposed dwelling, it is considered that the application for the demolition of the existing building and its replacement with a new build dwelling of the size and scale as proposed is compliant with policy H5 and therefore recommended for approval subject to the full list of conditions identified in the officer's report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy. I was very confused when I first read this, as we'd been there by panel as well. But obviously it has not had any tie on it or anything like that. Permitted developments, as you said, has been withdrawn. But I noticed there is no garage or anything like that. If they subsequently wanted to put a garage there, that they would have to come forward with another planning application. So that's fine. But there was confusion in the report alluding to Richard Anstice, but that is all if there was a farming connection to that, which obviously there isn't. So I can, now when I've read it several times in your description, I am clear in my mind now exactly what we're looking at today. I believe this is in Councillor Brown's ward, so I'm sure that she will be the first one that wishes to comment. Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. I thought that there was going to be.
Oh, sorry. I believe because of the paperwork all on my desk, we do have somebody that wishes to speak on the application. I'm sorry about that. I believe it's Mr. David Gleeson, is it, or Gleeson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, we have Shire Newton Community Council who want to make representations. So
right, you're going to read those out, are you?
Yeah, I'll read out the statement from Shire Newton Community Council, Madam Chair, then I'll read out the statement from the applicant.
Right, thank you very much. Sorry about that, Craig.
No problem, Madam Chair. So this is a statement from Shire Newton Community Council. Their recommendation to the Planning Committee is for refusal on the following grounds. There is an existing 2017 consent for the smaller cottage than is now proposed. We had objected to the 2017 application as an unwarranted intrusion on the open countryside, but as consent was granted, we take the pragmatic view that its appearance better reflects the local architecture and landscape compared to the current application. A much larger building was applied for last year and refused by MCC. The current application seeks consent for a larger dwelling, over 50% more than the existing consent, and the design has been significantly revised with hip roof ends and the Juliet balcony. Roof hips are not a traditional Monmouthshire building feature, and Juliet balconies are most certainly not, and both features are out of keeping. We are not persuaded by the argument the applicant could put a larger caravan on the site without the need for further consent. The certificate of lawfulness was, in the opinion of the planning officer at the time of the 2017 application, merely an authorisation that caravan could remain on site. But once its use as a residence has ended and it has been unoccupied for some years, it should be removed and the land restored to its original agricultural state. No garaging or other outbuildings are included in the floor area, and volume calculations and further development in these regards can be expected. At the least, a condition should be imposed removing the application for the general. A condition should be imposed removing the application of the general development order. I think that's referring to permitted development rights. We wish to encourage this community's young families to remain close to their roots. Larger houses in the area are too expensive for them. For this reason, we prefer the 2017 design. We note that as the application represents a replacement dwelling, no infrastructure contribution is required and the community will not therefore have additional funds to provide resources for our inhabitants. If this application is approved, we would wish to see a condition requiring local connection, occupation only. The site is partially screened from the roads by trees, which we consider important in alleviating the overall impact of the building, and these should be retained in any event by a planning condition. We would further request that the comments of the landscape and biodiversity officers are included in the conditions were consent to be given. And they are the comments from Shire Newton Community Council. If it's okay now, Madam Chair, I'll now read out the statement by the applicant's agent. Is that okay, Madam Chair?
Yes, certainly, carry on.
So this is the written statement from David Glasson, who is the agent acting on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Adams. This application is simply a revision of the replacement dwelling approved in 2018. It is not a rural enterprise dwelling and is compliant with policy H5, which permits replacement dwellings in the countryside. Negotiations with officers have addressed initial scale and design concerns such that the dwelling is now policy compliant, and a comprehensive range of landscaping measures and biodiversity benefits have also been incorporated into the scheme. The applicant is grateful for the cooperation of officers during the course of negotiations and look forward to the support of the committee. That is the statement from David Glasson. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for doing that, Craig. Sorry.
You're on mute, Madam Chair, sorry.
Sorry, Craig. I'm sure now that it's the turn now of the local member, Councillor Brown. Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think there is a little bit of confusion about the way the report has been presented, because in 1997 this mobile home was there, and then basically on appeal it was allowed a temporary consent for 3 years, and it was supposed to be removed in 2000, and then 2001 to 2016 there was evidence of occupation. It got a certificate of lawful occupation, and then in 2017 because of this residence, which only applied to the mobile chalet and not the garden as stated in the report, basically there was a replacement dwelling there. That replacement dwelling was smaller than the application that's being presented to us today. Then subsequently what happened is that the applicant applied for an even larger dwelling of 640 cubic meters, and then basically that wasn't refused, but it was withdrawn, obviously through negotiation, as being far too large and not complying with policy H5. This new application is larger than the original one in 2017, which hasn't been built and hasn't been implemented. So it's not, as the agent says, a modification of what's already been approved, because it's a separate application for a demolition of the mobile home and then building a new larger dwelling, which in my view does not comply with policy H5. And policy H5 makes it clear that, if I can just find that, sorry, I was trying to do two things at once. I'll just read out what policy H5 says. It says that the replacement dwelling shall be of similar size to the replaced, and it's not of similar size to the mobile home. And it says in policy H5, exceptionally, planning permission may be granted for larger replacement dwellings of high quality, sustainable design in the open countryside, where it can be demonstrated that the absence of high quality dwellings prevents the attraction of significant economic investment to Monmouthshire, and the proposals do not cause unacceptable harm to their setting and the landscape. There isn't a demand in the area for larger replacement dwellings, and I don't believe that it conforms with policy H5. I don't also buy the argument that you could put a caravan there of a larger size, because if you did put a caravan there of a larger size and it was a private dwelling like this is supposed to be, then even if it didn't need planning permission, it would have to have stringent licensing conditions applied to it, unless it was for agricultural use. And if it was for agricultural use, then it would help with the local area with affordable agricultural usage. Now, with regard to this larger 600 cubic meters, 640 cubic meters property that they applied for and withdrawn and pursued this application, then that was offered with an agricultural condition to it. And basically on that basis, the agricultural condition was looked at in terms of TAN 6 and the need to prove the 3 years of the functional test of 3 years of the need to have an agricultural worker on site. So in fact, there's been no offer within this other dwelling that's bigger than the original one of 2017. There's been no offer of an agricultural occupancy thing there. And I think there is a question mark now as to whether or not the agricultural occupancy condition comes back because of the fact that all that a certificate of lawful use does is suspend it. It doesn't get rid of it. And nobody's been in residence, as far as I know, since 2017 in any event. So I think there's a question mark there. Also, the expert that we had on this argued very strongly about TAN 6. Well, it doesn't comply with TAN 6, but even if the argument that's being put forward here is about policy H5, there's nothing in policy H5 about caravans or anything like that and their situation. And the other issue that the Community Council has raised is the fact that we don't think that we prefer the smaller design, which is actually in line with policy H5, because it's more of a modest farm style dwelling, which is more in line with the current footprint. And also it's it doesn't have features like a Juliet balcony and a hip roof, which quite frankly, in the context of the rural setting it's in, are totally inappropriate. So what we're saying here is that it's unnecessary to give a consent for this dwelling because it doesn't comply with policy H5, and also basically the design of the property that there is consent for, and this will be a private dwelling. So in other words, what the committee is being asked to do is to give approval for a larger dwelling. And the fact that H5 is applied so rigorously can be found by the fact that the 2017 consent actually stated in it basically that it said, sorry, I'll just read what it actually said as a condition. If substantial extensions or alterations were necessary, this development would not normally be considered. So in fact, what we've got here is an applicant who keeps pushing for larger and larger developments beyond what policy H5 allows. And I think that this application should either be refused or deferred to ask our expert reports to look at this, and also to look at whether or not the certificate of lawful residence has actually been, in a sense, suspended because of the fact that there hasn't been any residence there, and therefore the agricultural condition would apply. So I think it needs to be deferred to look at the legal and policy considerations in relation to this. And I think it should be borne in mind that this is all arisen by the applicant not actually following the inspector's planning decision, which was to remove the mobile chalet in the first place.
Thank you, Louise. Could I ask Amy, the caravan that was stated in the beginning for 3 years, was that permission for an agricultural worker or not?
No, the certificate of law.
Sorry?
Sorry, I was on mute.
Yes.
Yes, just to confirm, the certificate of lawfulness does not restrict any occupancy. It's not like an agricultural tie or a rural enterprise dwelling. There is no restriction on residential occupancy. Anybody could move into that caravan and live in it. So the certificate of lawfulness was granted, as we said. And that is now in perpetuity. There's no.
I understand that, Amy, but the caravan that was originally put there, you know, years ago, did that have permission to be there for 3 years? And was there any tie on it then?
No, there wasn't a tie on it then when it originally provided. I would say that in 1997, when the temporary permission was granted, it was the building was supposed to be removed after 3 years.
Yeah.
You are correct in that respect. It wasn't removed after 3 years. It was there for 16 years, and 10 of those years there is evidence to prove that it was occupied as a residential dwelling. Hence the certificate of lawfulness being granted. I appreciate the concerns in this respect, and I think 21 years ago that building should have been removed, and we have put procedures in place now to be able to check up on these temporary consents to make sure that that would be followed through. Now our new IT system provides that facility for us to do that. So I think 21 years ago, yes, it should have been removed. However, we're not in that position anymore. We have to assess the application that is in front of us. So just to clarify some of the questions there that you quite rightly raised, Councillor Brown, and sorry for any confusion if there has been any in the report or in the presentation. But the application that is in front of us now is for a building that is 407 cubic metres. I appreciate that the previous application of 343 cubic metres was approved and could be implemented and would be a more similar size to the existing building now. But that's what
I'm arguing. You know, that there's already consent there, and we don't need to give this consent because it's breach of H5.
Well, if I could just carry on. So the application now that is in front of us is for a larger building than the 343 cubic metres, but it is smaller than a structure that they could legally and lawfully replace at the moment. So they have a caravan. The certificate of lawfulness grants permission for a caravan with a residential use, unrestricted residential use, which could legally be replaced with another caravan of up to 415 cubic metres with an unrestricted residential use. So this application proposes a building that is smaller than what could legally be put on the site at present.
I appreciate that, but what I'm saying is a caravan is preferable because it will provide it's more likely to provide an agricultural worker, and the aim of TAN 6 is to provide an agricultural worker, and there is a possibility of a further application being made because there's a new carving building that's been granted permission there, and there might be an argument again. So, you know, this is against the policy of having buildings in the open countryside, and also that we strictly apply policy H5, which we aren't doing in this particular case, because we should say, and I've never seen anywhere in our policies about arguments about whether caravans could or couldn't be situated, and I think it would be preferable for an agricultural worker to actually have a caravan there because it's more likely to be used by an agricultural worker as an affordable dwelling than it would be if it was this relatively large house with a Juliet balcony and hip roof, which is more in keeping with you know, an estate area than in the middle of the countryside.
But could I come in there to justify an agricultural building? You'd have to have permission for a temporary caravan for 3 years, if maybe, but you have to justify it if there is that agricultural need. But there is no question now, after I've read it, that this has got no bearing on agriculture whatsoever, whether it's for a worker or anything, or what it looks like.
Yes, so we're looking at policy H5 and it doesn't comply with that. Because there was extra conditions on the last consent to actually put that forward, to make that specific point. So I can't understand why this has been allowed as being put forward.
All right. Anybody else now wishing to comment on the application, please? Thank you, Councillor Brown, because I'm sure you'll come back in later.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to come in?
Chairman,
Who's speaking?
Peter.
Right, Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, I'm listening to Louise's discussion, but we're basically here to look at a planning application before us this afternoon.
Yes.
On the application, I gather from what Amy has said that this new house is of a similar scale to the one that's already got approval within 2 cubic meters, so that would be acceptable. The design of the new one is far superior to the old one. Having lean-tos on the outside, on the side of a building, is very old hat. I know a Juliet balcony is not everybody's design, but the design of this house is far superior to the one that's already got approval, and I don't see a problem with it, and I personally would like to see it approved.
I think anybody could put an application in that's been approved and then put in an amended one or withdraw it or whatever, no matter where it is or what it's for. So anybody else now, which I believe.
Yeah,
now,
my hand is up, Chair.
Yes, I can see there are several up at the moment. Councillor Eason next, please.
Right, thank you, Chair. I'm concerned about the history of this particular site. In 2000, in May 2000, it was given a condition to be removed after 3 years. In May 2000, it wasn't removed and stood there for 16 years. There's no evidence to me in the report that somebody lived in that caravan in that period of time. Yet in 2016, the applicant came back to us for a certificate of lawful use, which was granted by the council in a property which seemed to me to be rotten then as rotten now. So now we're at a situation where the applicant is putting forward a plan on the basis that he wants to seek a replacement dwelling. Yet there's no evidence to me that anybody actually lived in that particular property. So who is this particular new property? But I understand Councillor Clark's views that it's a good plan, but who actually lived in the property before and who would be the intended to live in the property now? Because it comes to me there's a bit of shenanigans going on, in as much as you come to talk about affordable housing. Policy H4, it says the applicant seeks a replacement dwelling, so no net additional residential units are being created and there'll be no affordable housing contribution. I believe that there are words in here which suggest that there was somebody living there, which I find hard to believe, which will get the applicant out of the obligation of making a contribution on this sort of property, which wouldn't come very cheap and would carry certainly a fair amount of affordable housing contribution to the authority. This property should have been taken down in 2000, in year 2000. It wasn't taken down, and I think that has caused the situation we are in today, whereby it's alleged that people seem to have lived there and they just want to replace the dwelling for those people to live there. There's no evidence of that to me, and I feel that it should be deferred, as Councillor Brown says.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Eason. Amy, are you next online, please?
I'm sorry about my camera's off. It's flicking off and on, I don't know why.
That's all right. Amy, your hand is up next to Councillor Eason.
Yeah, I think Denzel will come in and just give us a little bit of a legal response to the certificate of lawfulness issue.
Yes.
But yes, that was submitted. There was sufficient evidence provided at the time. There were 2 individuals identified who were living in the property. I do have their names and their details up in front of me. It is in the report on the 2016 application for the certificate of lawfulness. They provided telephone bills, TV licenses, electricity bills, and photographs and evidence at the time. So the officer at the time considered that there was sufficient evidence to prove that a chalet was occupied by these 2 individuals, one from 2001 to 2007 and one from 2007 till 2016. So I think if Denzel wants to or could clarify the certificate of lawfulness to in terms of its current status, which would be good as well.
Before you ask Denzel to respond, could I ask the question as to why an individual allowed to live there between 2000 and 2016 when the property should have been removed? And
Yeah.
were those telephone bills line telephone bills or mobile telephones?
I'd have to dig further into the application to find out that level of detail, to be honest. It was obviously considered at the time by the officer that was sufficient evidence, and it proved their occupancy. you mentioned another question there, sorry.
I was concerned that there be no affordable housing contribution under policy LDH4 because the applicant is seeking to replace it, seeking to have a replacement dwelling. I'd like to know who the replacement dwelling is for, and is it really correct that this replacement dwelling is for those two individuals who are not there now since 2016? There's been nobody there, so it's not a replacement dwelling for anybody. It's just a dwelling for sale for somebody to make a profit without paying their appropriate affordable housing contribution to this authority.
Thank you.
Under the replacement dwelling policy, it doesn't prescribe that we need to know who lives in it now or who would live in it in the future. It is literally an application to remove one building and replace it with another building of the same residential use. So it wouldn't be up for the planning application to determine or prescribe who actually lives in there under the replacement dwelling policy. And under the replacement dwelling policy, there is no requirement for an affordable housing contribution because there's no additional residential unit created. There is one there now, and there would be only one there after the change in construction.
If I come there, if you remember, and I believe Tony was on the committee then, we went to one in my ward actually, Councillor Feakin, I think you can remember this, at Red House at Tallycode, where there was an old farmhouse, a cottagey type farmhouse, and that was a completely new build. I haven't been there since, you can't see it from the road, but it was a very futuristic design. I would be very pleased to go and see that again, but that was a completely new rebuild altogether, replacement dwelling. So Denzel, if you can please come in and if you can help with this lawful certificate of use.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify with a certificate of lawful use. It doesn't matter that the once it's been issued, the council's essentially said it's now immune from enforcement action for that use. So it doesn't matter that the person has stopped living in it since we've issued that certificate. I think by we've got sort of getting sidetracked now, and trying to second guess a decision the council's already made when the certificate was issued.
Yes.
If members want to sort of look into that decision, it's not really for this forum, I don't think. That sufficient evidence would have been provided at that time when an investigation was undertaken and when the application was made. We made the decision and it's now immune from enforcement action. The occupancy only had to be continuous for that 10-year period. If we were satisfied at the time that it was, we've now issued that certificate, and it's not really for us to start second guessing the investigation in this committee. We're just here to look at the application in front of us. The council has issued that certificate of lawful use, and I think we just have to take it at face value that we now can't take enforcement action against that use on that site.
So it means that there is a residency there, and whatever the building looks like now, whether it's dilapidated or not, it could have been a 3-story house or whatever dilapidated, it is now going to be residential use on that site, and they're issuing now an application for a replacement dwelling to be there on that site with no agricultural content attributed to it whatsoever.
Yeah, so essentially the certificate of lawful use is the council saying it stops us from taking enforcement action. We can no longer take enforcement action on that site for that use. Yeah.
Thank you. Right. Are you satisfied with that now, Tony Eason?
Sort of. Let's move on.
Right. Thank you. Right. I believe Councillor Feakin, are you wishing to speak now?
Yes, please, Chair, if I may.
Right. Carry on.
And it is a little bit to needle out Tony's point in regards to affordable housing. I accept very, very clearly the position on the certificate of lawful use, and that is the legal position. That is what it is. But just in relation to the affordable housing, my understanding, and I'll look to Denzel to correct me, was that the classification of a mobile home and the classification of a dwelling are separate. And my understanding at the moment is the certificate of lawful development or the certificate of lawful use was for a mobile home, and in the report we're talking that it would be possible to replace the existing chalet structure, which is classed as a mobile home, with a new mobile home. But that isn't the creation of a replacement dwelling. A dwelling is something different. Therefore, this would be a new dwelling in the countryside, and therefore would attract affordable housing. So just for the absolute clarity, other than that, I support the scheme. But are we absolutely sure of our position in relation to mobile home, which is existing, converted into the permission for a dwelling, doesn't therefore give rise to affordable housing contribution?
Thank you, Councillor Feakin. Anybody else wish to give clarity on that?
Madam Chair, do you want me to come in here?
Yes, please, Craig.
I was going to come in earlier, but I think my colleagues Dendel and Amy have covered the main point. Just wanted to sort of give members a bit of direction on this. I think it's been established now that there is a residential use on the site. The certificate of lawfulness has established that. I think discussing agricultural ties, TAN 6, it isn't relevant to this application. There is an unfettered residential use on that site for the mobile home / chalet, and that certificate of lawfulness has established that. The council has also approved a dwelling in 2017-2018, a smaller unit. We didn't seek an affordable housing contribution for that unit. So this is an area where I can see where Councillor Feakins and Councillor Eason are suggesting that potentially as a council we should be seeking an affordable housing contribution for this, but that isn't covered within our supplementary planning guidance. We do say that a replacement residential use, which is what this application is being considered, would be exempt from any affordable housing contribution. It would be in the gift of the planning committee if they decided to impose a housing contribution. You could do that, but I just wanted to, from an officer's point of view, our recommendation is that the supplementary planning guidance doesn't give us enough support for that, and we have approved a scheme 2017-2018 without an affordable housing contribution. So that has been considered. So I understand where Councillor Feakins is coming from with regards to seeking that contribution. However, I don't feel that the supplementary planning guidance allows us to do that, but that is within the gift of the planning committee if they decided to do that, and that obviously could be appealed by the applicant if they wish to.
Thank you for that, Craig. Next, I have Amy.
I think it was an old hand to answer the questions, but I'm here if there are any more.
Right, thank you, Amy. Sit tight. Councillor Brown next, please, and then Councillor Clark.
Yeah, I think I might come in after Councillor Clark, if that's all right.
Right, thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Clark? Councillor Clark?
Yeah, just thank you, Chairman. Going back to the small drawing we've got here of the proposed Red Barn farm, could I ask, if we approve it, that we have transoms of mullions to the windows at both the back and the front of the property and the gable end? We've got the old problem here of mullions and transoms to the front elevation, but not to the rear.
Right, thank you, Councillor Clark.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to comment? Otherwise, I'll ask now Councillor Brown to sum up on that. We'll go to the vote.
Yeah, I think I did ask for referral, and as far as deferral, and as far as I know, that was seconded by Councillor Eason.
Yeah.
I still think there is concern about this, basically in relation to, although it's been said that the agricultural condition isn't relevant here, this application was amended to a smaller one, and in the original one the applicant did offer an agricultural condition, and that hasn't been added in this case as part of the negotiation. I don't buy the caravan argument, because I think the caravan argument would actually assist in getting affordable accommodation for an agricultural worker, and there's nowhere in any of our LDP policies or in H5 that says this. It is a larger dwelling than was granted in 2017 in terms of cubic meters and in terms of that particular measurement, and so I think it should be deferred so that we can go back to the expert report of Mr. Ansis, and also look again at policy H5, because I don't think it applies. Also, the Community Council were concerned about having, we haven't concerned about having affordable accommodation in the area, and as is pointed out by Councillor Eason, there has been no affordable housing contribution added to this. The Community Council suggested that there should be a condition to say that the person who purchased this private dwelling, residential dwelling, would have a local connection, but that hasn't been considered either. So I think we should do something here about the affordable element of this particular thing. And also I do think the original design of the 2017 was better and more of a modest size, and I can't understand why a condition in 2017 was put on to make it quite clear that, you know, no larger dwelling would be considered, and here again we're going for a larger dwelling. So I think I would like it to be deferred, to reconsider policy H5, to look at updating the expert report, and also, which was there was part and parcel of the negotiation, was to do with the fact that he'd offered this agricultural condition, and also to look at affordable housing. So I think there's about 2 or 3 different reasons why this particular application should be deferred. So I should like to go for the deferral, if Councillor Eason will still support
that. Whether we should ever take note of whether there was he had offered an agricultural tie depends who owns the site. I mean, we have to not always know who has owned the site.
He does own the site. He was part of the person who, part of the, Mr. Adams was also part of the people who were supposed to occupy it for the lawful certificate on the basis of the evidence of bills alone.
But the thing is, to say to have a caravan for a farm worker, you have to justify the need to have something there for an agricultural worker.
Well, no, but on the larger dwelling, he was prepared to put that on it, you see. And on this one, there's been no offer to do so. And if he had done so, then TAN 6 would have applied. So that's part and parcel of the negotiation that was ignored in this instance. And I don't see anywhere in planning policies about the idea that you can put a caravan there instead, and therefore you should forget all your planning policies.
Madam Chair, can I just come in to clarify here?
Yeah, yes, please, Craig.
So the certificate of lawfulness has established that a mobile home and a cellar can go on it has to have a residential use. As planning officers, we've been pragmatic and allowed the same volume that is allowed under the Caravan Act, which could be erected at the replaced at the site, to be allowed for this replacement dwelling. The conversation about the agricultural tie, the previous consent in 2017-2018, Amy and other officers, correct me if I'm wrong, does not have an agricultural tie on it, and it's an unfettered residential use. There isn't any ties, restrictions on anybody living in that property, so anybody could live there, and that is the size of the dwelling. So all this application is seeking to do is have a larger dwelling than what was approved in 2017-18. I appreciate in the previous report it was stated that this was the limit of what could be extended, but the applicant does have the right to make a further application, which has been considered by planning officers and has been significantly reduced by Amy and Kate Young to reduce the planning application down to this size, which is pragmatic in view of what can be allowed under the volume of a caravan. So that is what is being considered today by planning by the planning committee. It is a unique site. It is a unique situation where we do have an unfettered residential use on the site, and the certificate of lawfulness has established that, and there is a previous planning consent from 2017 which does allow a dwelling. This is just asking for a larger dwelling, and as officers we feel that it's within those volume calculations. So I just want to clarify those points. There isn't any agricultural ties or link to the local connection here. It's unfettered.
Yeah, and also my experience of seeing caravans in the countryside usually do deteriorate and aren't usually very wonderful places to look at in the countryside. And also when and I know it's got nothing to do with agriculture now, but sometimes it is suggested if you want to have an additional farm worker, they suggest you have a caravan for 3 years to justify the need for that. And that is usually time limited to 3 years. But there again, whether that's got nothing at all to do with the application that we're looking at today. So it's irrelevant what Richard Anstice says or anything else in the report. So I think Councillor Brown has asked for a deferral and has got a seconder in Tony Eason. So perhaps we should go to that vote first.
Can I just come back on one comment? Yes, I support everything that Councillor Brown has said, but I would like to see this deferred and the matters that Councillor Brown has raised to be thrashed out, and for officers to go away with this applicant to ensure that we get policy H4 applied. I believe that there's a potential there for considerable amount of money for the council to help towards our affordable housing contribution schemes. I support the motion to defer.
Right, thank you. So we'll go first.
Madam Chair, can I just make a suggestion?
Yes.
In terms of the vote, obviously there has been, Councillor Brown has asked for
there has
a
to be a
deferment.
reason for this now, Craig.
So we have to have a reason for deferral.
Yes.
I think the reasons that have been outlined, officers have had those discussions with applicants, so and we are satisfied there is residential use there. So I think we need to be careful about what we are deferring for. Secondly, on the point that Councillor Lisa made about the affordable housing contribution, if planning committee are minded to approve it subject to that affordable housing contribution, we can have that vote today, and it could be, and you could make that decision today that the planning committee want that affordable housing contribution, and it'd be subject to. So the applicant would have to decide whether to appeal that or not. That would be within their gift, instead of deferring it for that reason. So you can make that decision today if you wanted to. So can I make the suggestion that we first vote on the deferral as discussed, and then secondly to take a vote on the application with the contribution? Yes.
Could Chairman, could I actually come in there?
Yes, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I think we'd be better to argue for a deferral, because I think that would help with the negotiation with regard to this particular issue.
Well, I think we'll go to the vote now, first of all, anyway, Councillor Brown, and then we have to take it from there. So first of all, I would like you all to look to the chat bar and take...
Before we move on, Chair, so we're going to take a vote on deferral. Should that deferral go through, fine. If it doesn't go through, we have another vote then, is that right?
Yes, on the contribution.
Right on, thank you.
Thank you. So please go to the chat bar now to vote, and this is on deferral.
Not come up yet, Madam Chairman.
Mine's up. Yeah.
Chat bar's not up for me.
Make sure you scroll down, Jim. You might have find it's at the bottom.
Yeah, got it now. Yeah, thank you, Phil.
Councillor Webb, have you got yours?
Councillor Webb left the building.
She gone, yeah.
All right, thank you.
And sent her apologies, Chair.
At the moment, Madam Chair, we've got 10 responses. There are 7 against deferral, 3 for referral. After Councillor Webb has left, I believe that there are 13 members present, so there's 3 left to vote. Assuming they all voted for deferral, it'll be 6 to 7. But given that could be quite close, could we ask for a vote by hand if that's possible?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you.
Is Richard going to ask for the vote?
Yes, Chair. I've got the details in front of me. I'll read out the members' names. The first member I've got is Councillor Becker. Councillor Becker.
Councillor Becker.
He's probably gone, Chair.
Right, carry on, Richard.
Councillor Brown.
For deferral.
Councillor Clark.
Against deferral.
Councillor Davis.
Against referral.
Sorry, Councillor Eason. Councillor Edwards,
Against deferral.
Councillor Feakins,
Against deferral.
Councillor Harris,
Against deferral.
Councillor Higginson,
Against deferral.
Councillor Murphy,
Against deferral.
Councillor Powell,
Against deferral.
and Councillor Woodhouse.
Against deferral.
I believe that's it, Chair.
So
Right.
somebody changed their mind.
I've got, I don't know whether my internet cut out there. I've got 9 votes, 11 votes in total, 9 against deferral, 2 for deferral. We previously had 3 for deferral. Has everyone had an opportunity to vote now? And is there anyone who hasn't voted?
No, so could you repeat that, please, Denzel, the actual?
So I have 9 votes against deferral and 2 votes for deferral. So that's clearly against deferral, which means that we now move to the second vote.
Right. Thank you.
And I believe that because it's been proposed to vote for it with affordable housing contribution, we'll have a vote for it with affordable housing contribution. If that fails, then we would move to just a vote as proposed by the officers.
Have we got an actual proposal for that? Because they did suggest that we haven't had a seconder.
So I'm happy to propose that we
Okay,
that we
thank you.
approve
Right
that
on.
we approve subject to affordable housing contribution.
Right, okay.
Right, thank you. So Councillor Eason is for contribution and of affordable housing, and Councillor Feakin has seconded that proposal. So now we'll go to that vote for a contribution on affordable housing.
Madam Chair, can I come in there, please?
Yes.
Just as Dem Services colleagues are getting the vote up in the chat to approve with the affordable housing contribution. Just wanted to make planning committee members aware again that officers have reviewed this position, the policy position, with regards to asking and requesting affordable housing contribution. This isn't outlined in our supplementary planning guidance. There is an unfettered residential use on the site, therefore there's no additional residential uses on the site. So I do consider that we shouldn't be asking for an affordable housing contribution. So I wanted members to be aware of that in terms of the policy stance, that there isn't any policy backing for this request, and obviously it'd be down for the applicant to make that appeal process and have to make you aware of that before you take this vote in terms of costs to the council if that was the case.
Because he
Wicked
could well win that appeal because we haven't got a leg to stand on.
Yeah, but Chairman, could I just add some extra comment on that, because earlier on we were told that it was within the gift of the committee to decide whether they wanted to put an affordable housing.
It still is.
Yeah, contribution. So, you know, from that point of view, and presumably the appeal inspectorate will take account of all of the history of this site as well.
Yes, Madam Chair, just to come in there. Yeah, it is. It's completely within the gift. That's what we're taking this vote for. It's completely. I'm just giving you the policy standing as my role is head of planning to give you, as members, all my advice in terms of being transparent and open with regards to the policy stance on this. There's an unfettered residential use on the site. We approved a dwelling in 2017-18 without any affordable housing contribution. Officers have reviewed it in terms of this application. We don't feel that we have enough grounds to ask for it, but as a planning committee, it's within your gift to request that if you wish.
Right, thank you, Craig. I'm sure everybody can understand that now, and please go to the vote for a contribution if you feel that is necessary, and if you feel that that is in your conscience, you can vote now on that contribution for affordable housing.
It's not come up for me, Madam Chairman.
It's coming up now, I believe.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
So we've had 9 responses. 6 are for with affordable housing. 3 are against with affordable housing. I think that based on the last vote, there are 2 left to vote. Again, that would make it 6-5 if both of those voted against. So can I ask that we have another vote by hand, Chair?
Right.
It's not come up for me yet.
No.
Okay, Chair.
Right, carry on then, Richard, please.
Okay, I'll start with Councillor Brown.
With affordable housing contribution.
Councillor Clark.
Say for or against is the easiest, I think.
Yeah, well, following what Craig said, I'm against.
Councillor Davis.
Against.
Councillor Eason.
For.
Councillor Edwards.
Against.
Councillor Feekins.
For.
Councillor Harris.
For.
Councillor Higginson.
Against.
Councillor Howard. Sorry, Councillor Howard isn't here. Councillor Murphy.
I'm going to change my mind and say against.
Councillor Powell.
Against.
Councillor Woodhouse.
For.
That's it, Chair.
Right, thank you, Richard. Denzel, you're going to give the result?
Yes, so we've had, that's 11 votes again in total. That's 5 have voted for approval with the affordable housing, 6 have voted for approval without the affordable housing. So that motion has failed. So I think we now need to move to the final vote, which is for the proposal as suggested by the officers.
Right, thank you, Denzel. So we will ask the officer now to put the vote for the application that we have been debating this afternoon.
If you just bear with me, Chair,
Yes,
that will
thank
take
you,
a minute
Richard.
or two. Thanks.
Chair.
Yes, certainly.
Will my suggestions about mullions and transoms be included?
Sorry?
Will my suggestion regarding transoms and mullions on the rear elevation?
Yes, we can
be
put that in
included?
as a condition.
Thank you.
Can we vote on that?
No.
Chair, would it help if I just clarified exactly what we're voting on now?
As officer's recommendation, Amy.
That's correct, yes, as per the officer's recommendation and all of the conditions outlined in the report with the additional ones suggested by Councillor Clark.
Yes. Thank you, Amy.
So we've only had 4 responses so far. That's 5 now, Chair.
It's not come up for me yet, Madam Chair.
Mine's only just come up, Councillor. It's looks to me as clearly carried, so I'll leave it to you, Denzel.
Yes, so we've had 9 responses. I believe there's 11 members currently present. 7 are for approval, 2 are against approval. So in this case, even if the 2 voted against approval, it would still be clearly carried.
Yes.
So that motion has been passed.
Right, thank you very much indeed. That is the completion of our applications of the afternoon, but we do have some information on our appeals, please. Is that you doing that, Phil?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, happy to contribute with the appeals. So if I can you still see the presentation?
Which presentation do you?
Can you still see?
Yes.
Yeah, I got that now, yeah.
Abergavenny now, Phil.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So the first appeal that we've reported is the members will be aware of this. Have been to the site at least twice, I think, in the past. So this was a very narrow infill plot in Fosterville Crescent in the conservation area in Abergavenny. Some big Edwardian houses nearby, and then more modern infill nearby. This would have looked rather squeezed in, and that was the design that the inspector didn't sympathise with, so it was dismissed, the appeal, as per the member recommendation. He didn't have too many problems with the actual outright design of the building. He was just more concerned about the adverse effects of having large retaining structures around the building, and then gates being shut, which would have looked out of character. So yeah, it's a slightly odd decision, but I think so. Not shut the door to a potential application for a dwelling coming in there, but certainly this design solution wasn't favoured and was dismissed. So certainly that's one that he broadly agreed with the members on.
Could I bring in Councillor Powell there? I believe it was in her ward, and I dare say she's not surprised at the outcome.
Oops.
Councillor Powell?
I'm trying to get on to you, but
Yes, I can hear you.
You can't see me. My camera keeps going off, so you don't mind that, do you?
No, right, carry on.
Oh no, yeah, no, I'm not surprised at them refusing it because of the same reason. It's not the building itself; it's the fact that there isn't room at the side of it to actually do the building without taking down a neighbour's bank, which of course the neighbour's not going to let them take the bank down to build their house. So that is the reason as much as anything, and I think that the decision they've made is the correct one.
Right, thank you, Councillor Powell.
Yeah, you get a good idea of from the visuals there in the middle, the coloured elements there, to see how oppressive the walls would be, really, and out of character.
Yes.
So, yeah, so it was a decent decision.
And to do those walls, they would have had to take part of the neighbour's land, and no way would they have allowed that.
Yeah, so impractical as well.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the next one was Horseshoes Barn. Is that in your ward, Ruth? I'm not sure.
No, Landrianco Croconi.
Ah, right, okay.
That's okay. David Jones.
Yes.
But they wanted to join those two elements together, you see in the lower photo, with that linking structure, and it would have really harmed the character of that stone barn, linking it to the more utilitarian structures. Yeah. So we refused that. It was an officer decision, I believe. And the inspector wholeheartedly agreed that it would change the whole form and
yes,
and relationship of the building. So it was unacceptable.
Like a sprawl of buildings. Otherwise.
Yes, indeed, yeah. It would have looked incongruous and unacceptable in design terms. So it was another good decision. And then the other one is in Phil's ward in St Bride's and Netherwent, and again this was a committee decision. Where the applicant sought to extend an already extended barn conversion, and you can see the visuals there provide the size of the extension that was proposed, which wasn't in compliance with our LDP policy on rural building conversions. So again, that was dismissed, and so all three were dismissed. I think that's it now. So that was another good one to be successful on for us.
Yes, we're doing well on the appeals. Well, all I can say is thank you very much, and I close the meeting only to say that please keep safe. We're not sure as yet. We're all in lockdown whether we should be carrying on next committee. We hope we can be. And obviously I'm in County Hall with Councillor Clark and Councillor Roger Harris with the officers all in different rooms. But we'll just have to take it as it comes, and hopefully we can still keep planning going, because I'm sure the applicants out there are, really want us to make these decisions, good or bad. But I just hope we all keep safe and see you all again next month, although we'll try and do delegated remotely as we have been doing. So I believe, Craig, do you wish to say something as well?
Sorry, Madam Chair. If I was only going to ask, Madam Chair, if the members are okay to stay on after informally to have a discussion.
We'll close the meeting first then, Craig, And
Yes,
Richard can do that, and then we can carry on. How long do you want? 5-10 minutes?
5-10 minutes it should take, yes.
Right. Thank you, members. Please hold the fort for a moment.
I'm trying. Sorry, I can't seem to get rid of me. Saying it's going.